Yes.
And now.
Good evening. I want to call this meeting of the Durham City Council to order at 7 o'clock on Monday, October the 19th. And I certainly want to welcome everyone here tonight, my colleagues, all of our city staff, and the other people who are here to speak on public hearing items, and all those who are listening to this meeting, streaming it, or otherwise viewing this meeting. We're glad to have you and look forward to a good, constructive meeting together. I'm now going to ask you to please join me in a moment of silent meditation. Thank you. Councilmember Reese, could you please lead us in the pledge to the flag?
I will, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. And greetings to my colleagues, staff, and Durham residents watching at home. I will now recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Reese. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mayor Schewel.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Caballero.
Here.
Councilmember Freelon.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Present.
Councilmember Middleton.
Here.
Councilmember Reese.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, we'll now proceed with the ceremonial items. And the first ceremonial item is one of my favorite ceremonial items of the year. We did have this Saturday a virtual version of the Run with the Mayor. This is the 9th year in which I have, before I was mayor, it was just Run with me. But it has become, as you all know, a city tradition and also part of our health plan now. And it was awesome. It's been an interesting year in many ways, but one constant has been the outstanding leadership of our city staff and continuing to focus on the health of our employees. And that has just been a constant that I'm very proud of. And we had this weekend as part of that on Saturday, albeit it looked a little different than previous years. Our employees again showed their strength and their spirit in the Run with the Mayor. We had more than 120 employees this year, which was awesome. And they logged nearly 360 miles during their run and walk or rolling or strolling, whatever they chose to do. And what was cool this year was, since we couldn't be together, at 9:30 we convened on Zoom, and then people took off and did all their running and walking, and they did it all over the triangle. They did it in Umstead State Park, they did it on the Ellaby Creek Trail, they did it in Bahama. There was one of our city clerk and her husband went to Hagenstone State Park, south of Sanford, to do their 5 miles. We had somebody in Pisgah National Forest, and farthest away of all, we had a runner at Exit Glacier in Seward, Alaska. So this was a very different and fun Run with the Mayor this year. As you all know, I'm very competitive when it comes to this event. And let me just say that a lot of people beat me. but I didn't beat my arch rival, Melinda Squires Nelson. Melinda, you will never beat me. I just want to say that. And I'm just throwing down the gauntlet for next year. But the people that, the fastest mile was run by Robert Repeal in water management, 5 miles in a time of 31 minutes and 31 seconds. Friends, that's 6 minute and 18-second miles. That is very fast. Maybe the fastest we've had in this esteemed event. And the fastest female was Megan Walsh in a time of 47 minutes and 50 seconds, so just over 9 minute, 30-second miles. Megan's in Public Works. People who beat me, in addition to Robert Repeal, were Bill Haley, Colin Davis, Dana Horncole. Dana beats me every year. Harmon Henderson, Jeffrey Johnson, John Loperfido, J.J. Scott, Kevin Lilly, Paul Wiebke, still super fast. Peter Wu, Randy Stewart, Sam Jackson, Sean Dewing, Sean Tuttle, Tom Dawson, and Timothy Stewart. And so congratulations, you guys, but just remember, I'm 69, okay? I will say that my time was 47:30. I ran 9 minutes and 30-second miles, and that's the best I can do, and I'll never do better. So if you run next year, more people will beat me. But it was super fun. I want to congratulate everybody who participated in this year's run, and special thanks to the HR department, including Elizabeth Tetley, Drew Bullard, Gwendolyn Burnett, Kiana Bailey, and Veronica Jackson, and everybody who worked to make it possible. Super fun event. We weren't able to, usually I buy the assembled group an adult beverage of their choice after the race. We weren't able to do that this year, but I look forward to it. Look forward to doing it next year. All right. We'll now move on to our second ceremonial item. And that item is the Indigenous Peoples Day Proclamation, which is going to be read by Councilmember Freeman.
I appreciate the opportunity to share this proclamation this month, acknowledging that one day it'll be a federal holiday. So whereas Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations to the United Nations sponsored international conference on discrimination against Indigenous populations in America. And whereas in making this proclamation, we pay respect to the cultures and populations that exist long before European contact, we celebrate the contributions of all Indigenous people to the culture of diversity, innovation, and resilience that has marked the city of Durham as leaders on the global stage. And whereas we value the many contributions made to our community through Indigenous peoples' knowledge, labor, technology, science, philosophy, arts, and the sincere cultural contributions that have substantially shaped the character of the city of Durham. And whereas the city of Durham recognizes that it was founded and built upon the lands first inhabited by the Indigenous people of this region, and acknowledges and honors these members of the community, both past and present. Two Native American tribes, the Ino and the Okanichi, related to the Siksika, lived and farmed here, established settlement sites, transportation routes, and environmentally friendly patterns of natural resources. And what is thought to be the site of the ancient Native American village named Ashnerd. And whereas a growing number of cities and towns in the United States have recognized the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples Day, an opportunity to learn and celebrate the Indigenous heritage and resilience. And whereas we celebrate the acts of resistance and persistence that have shaped the experiences of Indigenous communities since first contact with Europeans. We continue to celebrate the Native American communities who exemplify the best of who we are and who we can be as a Bull City. Now, therefore, I, Stephen M. Schul, Mayor of the City of Durham, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim October 12th, 2020, the Indigenous Peoples Day in Durham, and hereby encourage other institutions to recognize this day and reaffirm the city's commitment to promoting the well-being, growth, and growth of Durham's American Indian and Indigenous communities. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Thank you for that important resolution, important proclamation. Our next proclamation, the Arts and Humanities Month proclamation, will be read by Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everyone. Good evening to my colleagues. I'm particularly pleased to be reading this proclamation. I'm aware of the prodigious amount of consumption of art that my colleagues on this council engages in, so I'm particularly honored to be reading it. I also can't help but think about my sainted mom, who's passed on now as a New York City public school special education teacher. Didn't have much money, but used the arts and really scrounged up ways for us to consume music and art. There are always speeches in the house, and she used art to help me overcome my own speech impediment as a child. So I'm particularly honored to be reading this proclamation regarding the arts. Proclamation. Whereas the nation's 120,000 nonprofit arts organizations, the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the nation's 4,500 local arts agencies, and the Arts and Humanities Councils of the 50 states and the 6 U.S. jurisdictions have regularly issued official proclamations on an annual basis designating October as National Arts and Humanities Month. And whereas the arts and humanities embody much of the accumulated wisdom, intellect, and imagination of humankind, and whereas the arts and humanities enhance and enrich the lives of every American, and whereas the arts and humanities play a unique role in the lives of our families, our communities, and our country, and whereas cities and states, through their local and state art agencies and representing thousands of cultural organizations, have celebrated the value and importance of culture in the lives of Americans and the health of thriving communities during National Arts and Humanities Month for several years. And whereas the humanities help diverse communities across the United States explore their history and culture with the support and partnership of the National Endowment for the Humanities, the 55 state and territorial humanities councils, and local educational and cultural institutions. And whereas the arts and culture industry also strengthens our economy by generating $166.3 billion in total economic activity annually, $27.5 billion in government revenue, and by supporting the full-time equivalent of 4.6 million jobs. And whereas the creative economy drives tourism and commerce, supports American workers, and makes up 4.5% of the annual GDP, proposed federal legislation titled the CREATE Act, S-650, and HR 1519, and the PLACE Act, S-3232, would support economic development of the creative economy. Now, therefore, I, Steve Schewel, Mayor of the City of Durham, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2020 as National Arts and Humanities Month in Durham, and call upon our community members to celebrate and promote the arts and culture in our nation, and to specifically encourage the greater participation by those said community members in taking action for the arts and humanities in Durham. Witness my hand, this the 5th day of October, 2020, Steve Schewel, Mayor.
Thank you very much, council member. Appreciate it very much. I think that colleagues, I just will let you know that I'll be trying to work with the clerk soon so that I think our next advancement in this area would be get someone to receive these. We've gotten to where we're now doing the proclamations and resolutions again, ceremonial items, and I think we can begin to have people come to receive them, and I'll work with the clerk on that. I really appreciate the way our technical staff and our clerk staff have consistently just moved us forward on including more and more through this technology. But thank you all so much. I'll now ask if there are announcements by members of the council. Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening again, colleagues, staff, and members of the public who are watching at home. Mr. Mayor, I did have an announcement, but I also wanted to let you know that my family participated in the Run with the Mayor Challenge today, a little bit time separated from y'all. We did not go 5 miles unless you add up the distance that all of us traveled together. It took us, my wife and I walked, my girls rode their scooters, and I think we took about 47 minutes to do our trip as well. So we were thinking about you today, Mr. Mayor. By the way, Third Fork Creek Trail looks fantastic right now. I've seen evidence of very recent maintenance out on the trail. I just want to thank our staff for keeping that amenity such a great resource for the folks here in South Durham. Speaking of South Durham, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you're aware, but there is an election this year. It's 2020. We have races starting with soil and water supervisor at the very back of the ballot, and at the very top, we're electing a president of the United States. Durham really is in the epicenter of this campaign. Smart folks, a lot smarter than me, say that whoever wins North Carolina will probably be elected the next president of the United States. And as has always been the case, Durham is really critical to anyone who's trying to win a campaign statewide. I'm really, really proud of how Durham has shown up both during the mail-in portion of absentee voting and now during early voting. Polls are still open, by the way, today. They'll close in about 14 minutes. So I only have data from last night, or as of this morning. But as of this morning, 30% of all registered voters in Durham had already cast a ballot, which is extraordinary. And this year, it's easier than ever to cast your ballot in Durham. So I want to encourage anyone who is listening now that has not yet voted in this election to make a plan, do your research, figure out what candidates support your values, and go out and vote. The easiest way to figure out how to do that is to go on the internet at decovotes.com, that's DCOvotes.com, where you'll find a list of the 14 early voting sites open across Durham County. They are open every day between today and October 31st, Halloween, even on Sundays. And so you can easily find the site that works best for you and your schedule. All staff inside the polling places will be wearing personal protective equipment, and they'll be spacing folks out to maintain social distancing. So voting in person during early voting is as safe as possible for both staff and folks in Durham trying to cast their ballots. In addition, this year, for the first time during early voting, the city of Durham has made Go Durham buses fare free between now and October 31st, thanks to a group of very committed community members who came to the city with this recommendation, and also our staff, especially the folks at Go Durham, to make that possible. They'll also be fare free on election day as well, Tuesday, November 3rd. And so it's, as I said, it's never been easier to vote, and it's really, really important, as it is every election. Just one more thing to brag on Durham a little bit. They keep a list of the top precincts in the state for voting. That is the mail-in voting, turn in your ballot, or in person. And as of this morning, 10 of the top 25 precincts in North Carolina were here in Durham County, 4 of the top 7, and the top precinct in the state for votes is 35.3 Parkwood, very close to where I live here in South Durham. Mr. Mayor, more people have voted in the Parkwood precinct than in 30 individual counties in the state of North Carolina. That's how committed the folks in South Durham are in making their voices heard. So y'all folks living in other parts of the county and the city, step up your game, get on Parkwood's level, because South Durham is bringing it, and I want y'all to bring it too. Let's do it like Durham and make sure that this election, all our voices are heard. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Thanks for, I'm glad to hear you were walking, running, and strolling. And yeah, do it like Parkwood. That's awesome. All right, other announcements. Councilmember Freelon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, colleagues, community members. I just wanted to do a little report back. A few weeks ago, we were instructed by a resident to ask ourselves every day what we were doing to address violence in the community. Y'all remember that email? And I've really taken that quite literally, and I've had almost an obsessive response to that request. And if I don't do at least one thing every day, it feels like, you know, I haven't brushed my teeth or made my bed. It just feels weird. And I wanted to share some of those efforts, not to pat myself on the back, but actually to be accountable to Durham residents, to tell them that we care and that I'm literally doing everything that I can. and in responding to the urgent kind of calls for accountability around the violence. So the primary thing I've been doing is having a lot of conversations, and there is a particular thing at the end of this that I want to share. Having a lot of conversations, sometimes dozens per day. And over the past several days, I've met with clergy. They laid out the quilt of all the murdered folks in Durham in front of the Durham Police Department on Saturday. I was there with the mothers of Black boys who've been killed. I've been doing deep dives with my radical Black feminist abolitionists defund folks, and also with my colleagues here on council over the past 5 days. I've spoken to each of my colleagues, County Manager Davis, Police Chief Davis. Oh, they're both Davis. That's right. I thought I was mixing them up, but County Manager Davis and Chief Davis. And I've been canvassing. On Saturday of last week, I canvassed in the neighborhood College Heights, which like last Thursday at the city council session, we had the presentation from Chancellor Akinyele about the need for various measures that the city needs to take to keep the campus community safe. Literally the day after that meeting, there was a shooting in College Heights. And one of the speakers from that work session, Beverly Evans, somehow found my number, and she texted me audio from the actual shooting. The doom, 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 doom. She sent that to my phone. And for those who are listening, certainly my colleagues will remember when Beverly Evans was speaking about the history of that neighborhood, I mentioned that the 103-year-old resident, Mozella McLaughlin, who still lives in the same house she's been in for 76 years and was a mentor and babysitter to me, is still in that neighborhood. So after I heard about the shooting, I called her and other residents, and then I organized a group of about half a dozen North Carolina Central students and community members to canvass that neighborhood and talk to folks about what they think they need to make them safe, which leads me to kind of the announcement. The Central students were so excited about that work, about knocking doors in the neighborhood and talking to community members and checking the pulse of a place that had very recently been rocked by violence, that we're actually going to do it again this weekend. So on Saturday, this Saturday, I've got at least half a dozen Central students, some folks from BYP, Mama Nia from Spirit House, and others who did the canvas in College Heights are also going to canvas McDougal Terrace with Ashley Kennedy. I don't know if anyone was looking on Facebook Live this past week, but Ashley was live streaming 2 shootings that took place in that neighborhood last week. So we're going to link up with her and get some food trucks and try to knock on doors and talk to folks about what they feel is going to make them safe. And I think that's really important work because, one of the critiques has been we haven't been hearing from folks, who are directly impacted by the violence. And so, we're just some concerned, Durham residents that really care about this community and are doing everything we can to check in with folks, primarily to see that they're okay. And then number 2, to pick their brains and to tap their radical imaginations to see what's possible. So I wanted to use my announcement to extend that invitation to my colleagues and other members of the community who would like to join us. And I'll share more details about that at the work session on Thursday. But I just wanted to put it out there that we will be canvassing in McDougal Terrace on Thursday. And my second announcement, just real quick, another outgrowth of these conversations and efforts to address violence in the community has coalesced in a movement to create a fund to support community organizers and folks doing grassroots work to address the root causes of violence. And so I've talked to Police Chief Davis on Friday, and she said, by the time you call us, it's too late. We spend $70 million a year on policing, and it's reactionary. The most common thread I heard in our canvas on Saturday is that, we need to give kids and youth an alternative, something for them to spend their time doing that's constructive and positive. And so this fund will be an opportunity to do that. I've spoken to all my colleagues about it, and I know there will be a proposal rather, coming soon called the We Are the Ones Fund. And so I wanted to take the announcement time to tell community members that that's coming, because I keep getting the question, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And it's a legitimate question, because kids are dying in the street and they want to feel that we care and that we're taking action. So this isn't my project, it's a community project, but I've been in conversation with several partners. It'll be an ask in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to create micro grants for community groups to amplify their work. And again, it's called the We Are the Ones Fund, quoting queer Black feminist poet June Jordan, who said, "We are the ones we've been waiting for." So details on that are forthcoming, but I just wanted to let our beloved Durham community know that violence, we do think it's a crisis, it's a top priority, and I will advocate to put our money where our mouths are and to supplement some of the visionary community-based work that's already been going on in the community for years, but they've been doing that work under-resourced. So yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity, Mr. Mayor and colleagues, for indulging me. I know y'all have all heard this spiel from me individually, but I thought it would be important to tell the community that that's coming, and to say it as soon as possible so that they can feel the urgency of the words and the work.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Freelon, and thank you for doing that canvassing and for making those contacts. Other announcements, colleagues. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate Councilmember Freelon sharing all that he's been doing, and I really appreciate all that you're pouring into moving us forward in this conversation. I know that over the years, I've probably stressed it more than anything, that we have to do more than what we're doing, and acknowledging the limitations that we have. I am gratefully accepting of you taking the lead on all of that. And if there's anything I can do to help, of course, I'd be free and available for that canvassing. I just want to make sure we don't leave out the other neighborhoods that have been asking for those types of supports. I will also note that the HOPE Fund is available. It's $117 million for rental assisted and utilities. And I want to make sure that folks are aware and acknowledging that the funds will probably run pretty quickly because they're available statewide. And so that's for anyone in the state, and just acknowledging that there are struggles. And so for the last 6 months that people have lost jobs and have been out of work, just trying to figure out how to make ends meet. I do want to note that the governor has made funds available, and you can call 211, or you can actually go online to NC, and I want to make sure I don't mess it up. Hold on, I just had the website. nc211.org/hope, and there are applications available. And just noting that in this COVID pandemic, as you try to whittle away at at the kind of progress that we've been making, and trying to address some of the disparities over the years around racism and around all the other barriers that have been in place. I'm very excited that this is happening and that this is available to prevent evictions from occurring. I will also note that the utility companies, I believe, are starting to pick back up on following up on collections, and so this will be very helpful. And so I really hope that folks will take advantage of the opportunity to do this immediately and don't wait. And then secondly, I had a follow-up. So from the work session last time, we actually had a joint city-county committee meeting, and I wanted to share that based on feedback from the county commissioners, there was a note or a kind of a asterisk on the conversation of moving forward with the Community Health and Safety Task Force, and that there was a request that I said I would bring forward to our council, and making sure that I make you all aware, and I'll continue to press forward with this conversation, that the chair and vice chair be selected by the members of the committee, because it's important to make sure that the committee has it gets off the ground running and doesn't stall or start, and moving forward in the kind of vein of what Councilmember Freelon was talking about. You want to make sure that you have the folks who are centered in the conversation leading, and that usually happens when folks pick who they want to lead them. So I just want to make sure that I bring that forward. That would mean we would need to change the bylaws or adjust the bylaws that we put forward, because it did indicate that the mayor and the chair of the county commission would select the chair and vice chair. So just making sure that I note that. And just one last note. I want to say that the gun violence situation is far more present for me. Just noting last night, listening to the 12 gunshots and worrying about, exactly where they're coming from and if anyone is laying on the ground, hurt or needing support or assistance, and how quickly that can get to them. And so I just want to acknowledge that there are so many facets of this conversation, and I want to hold up that North Carolina Central's request for those 5 items, being a shot spotter, being additional police presence, being, I think there was a request for the former County Commissioner Michael Page, who works with the North Carolina Central University, to be on the Community Health and Safety Task Force. And there were two others, but I just say that to say that there's a lot happening, and I really hope that it can all come together, because I think that this is what we need. Is not to just focus on one area, but to actually cover as many as possible and put as many folks to work in it as possible. So I thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Are there any other announcements? Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everyone again. In the last 72 hours, Durham has been visited by high-profile celebrities, a top of the ticket for a presidential race, and we have set records in terms of voter turnout. So it's been a pretty phenomenal weekend in Durham. Also in the last 72 hours, gunfire has continued to ring out in our city just last night. It continues to be a de facto state of emergency in our streets for many of our people. And I want to just keep the attention on that. I want to fully associate myself also with what my brother and colleague, Councilor Freelon, has said. I can tell you right now, I'm down for spending money. I believe we should push every button and pull every lever. But I also want to say that if we as a city and as a government will insist on approaching this issue as an either or, if we're going to insist that we approach it as either or rather than flooding the zone and emptying our quiver and firing every arrow at this issue, then I would respectfully submit that if we're not going to do the free thing that actually has metrics built into it and decide to spend money on something that is well-intentioned, then I think one of the questions that we have to be prepared to answer is, when can we expect the numbers to go down? If that's going to be our response and the only part of our response, then can we causally link that to a time when we can expect the numbers of what's going on in our city to go down based upon however much we spend right now? I believe the time to talk to a heart attack victim about lifestyle changes in their fitness program is not while they're having a heart attack. We need to stabilize them first and get them out of ICU, and then talk about changing their diet and getting their exercise. Many of our people are having a heart attack right now. And I think that it's important that we push every button and pull every lever. And whatever metric or whatever test we apply to any one recommendation, then we ought to be prepared to answer that same question for any other recommendation that we bring forth. So I want to say right now, even before we have the conversation, I'm prepared to support what anybody on this council brings forward to address this issue. But I do also want to caution us that if we insist on approaching this as either or, rather than this and that, then we need to be prepared to answer some hard questions about the singular choices we make, as opposed to flooding the zone with a myriad of responses to this problem. And I agree with you, Councilor Freeland. I want folk to know that this issue will be front and center. Everything else is secondary. Everything else is secondary in our city to this. May God bless the families that have experienced gun violence recently, and may we preserve further children and families from experiencing it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Any further announcements? All right, colleagues, thank you. We'll now move to priority items by the city manager.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of the Durham City Council. I have 3 priority items this evening. Agenda item number 8, North Durham Water Reclamation Facility and Acadia Street Water Main Replacement and Fletcher's Chapel Road Sewer Improvements. Award of construction contract to Carolina Civil Works Incorporated. Pursuant to City Council's request, additional information has been provided in attachment number 7. Agenda item number 17, Consolidated Annexation, Farrington Road Multifamily, BDG 1900017. Attachment number 19 has been updated. And finally, agenda item number 19, Paschall's Bakery Building and Studebaker Building, landmark repeal. Pursuant to City Council's request, additional information has been provided in attachment number 7. That is all I have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Manager. Madam Attorney, any priority items for us tonight?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council. The City Attorney's Office has no priority items this evening.
Thank you, Madam Attorney.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, any priority items tonight?
Good evening, everyone. The City Clerk's office has no priority items.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
You're welcome.
We will now proceed with the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of items that were previously worked on by the council and can be approved. The consent agenda can be approved by a single vote of the council. Items can be removed by members of the public or by members of the council. And if an item is removed, it will be held until the end of the meeting for consideration. For the consent agenda, item 1, approval of city council minutes. Item 2, Durham Affordable Housing Implementation Committee appointment. Item 3, Durham Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission appointment. Item 4, Durham Convention and Visitors Bureau Board of Directors, DBA Discover Durham appointments. Item 5, Durham Planning Commission appointment. Item 6, Durham Workers' Rights Commission appointment. Item 7, request to amend the fiscal year 2021 capital improvement project ordinance for general funds, solid waste, stormwater, and transit funds, and grant project ordinance. Item 8, North Durham Water Reclamation Facility and Acadia Street water main replacement and Fletcher's Chapel Road sewer improvements, award of construction contract to Carolina Civil Works, Inc. Item 9, interlocal agreement for the collection of taxes with the County of Orange. Item 10, resolution for installment financing contract amendment. Item 11, acquisition of 1602 Midland Terrace, PID number 159782. Item 12, construction contract with Engineered Construction Company for Rock Quarry Park upgrades. Item 13, Fair Housing Assistance Program Grant Project Ordinance. Item 14, Odyssey Drive Culvert Replacement, ST 2020-01. Item 15, Odyssey Drive Culvert Replacement, ST 2018-01, Amendment Number 2. Colleagues, you have heard the consent agenda, and I now accept a motion for its approval.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Caballero, seconded by Councilmember Freelon. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schubel,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it and the motion passes unanimously and the consent agenda is approved. We'll now move to the general business agenda, public hearings. And the first item is item 16, Consolidated Annexation, 1101 Olive Branch Road. We will first hear from staff, and I see Ms. Smith. Welcome, Ms. Smith.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. This item, as you remember, was continued from your regular meeting on September 8th, 2020 to this evening. I'm Grace Smith. I'm with the Planning Department. And before I start the review of this item, I would like to state for the record that all Planning Department notices for hearings have been carried out in accordance with state and local law, and the affidavits for those notices are on file in the Planning Department. You may recall this is a request for a utility extension agreement, voluntary annexation, a future land use map amendment, and a zoning map change by Tim Sivers of Horvath and Associates. It's for one parcel of land located at 1101 Olive Branch Road, totaling 178 acres. The annexation petition is for a contiguous expansion of the corporate city limits. The case is BDG 19-00007. In addition, the applicant proposes to change the zoning designation of the site from rural residential to planned residential development, PDR 2.999, with the development plan committing to a maximum of 421 townhouse units and single-family residential dwelling units. The applicant also proposes to change the future land use map designation of the site from very low density residential to low density residential. There is no change to the recreation and open space designation. If approved, the annexation petition and the associated applications will become effective on December 31st of this year. Key commitments include restricting townhomes and single-family detached residential units as the building permitted type, dedicating additional right-of-way for a future bicycle lane, and providing contributions to the Durham Public Schools and dedicated housing fund. And as of late this afternoon, the applicant did wish to change their proffer for that, and they can speak to that when they get to their presentation. The city and county operational departments have not identified any significant negative service impacts. The budget and management services department determined that the proposed annexation will become revenue positive immediately following the annexation. Additional information can be found in the staff report. The Planning Commission recommended denial of this case at their June 2nd, 2020 meeting by a vote of 4-9. There are 4 motions required for this application. The first is to adopt an ordinance annexing the property and entering into a utility extension agreement. The second is to adopt a resolution amending the future land use map. And the third would be to adopt a consistency statement. And the fourth is for the zoning ordinance. The applicant is on the call and staff is available if you have any questions. I believe the applicant has a presentation and I'm happy to help share the screen for that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. Colleagues, you've heard the report from staff, and I'm now going to declare this public hearing open. I'm going to first ask if there are any questions by members of the council for our staff. Any questions for staff at this point? All right, we have several people who have signed up to speak on this item. Ms. Schwedler, are you leading the presentation for the applicant? Jamie Schwedler. Madam Clerk, can you make her available to be heard?
I've unmuted her.
Good evening. Schwedler, can you be heard? Thank you. Are you leading the presentation for the applicant, Ms. Schwedler?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I am.
Okay, I have certain people listed as proponents. I want to make sure that, are they planning to speak or are they just available for questions? That includes Balhong Wan, Robert Anderson, Jamie Davis, Timothy Sivers, and Ladidra Matthews. Are they members of your team?
They are, and they'll be available for questions, but I'll be handling the presentation.
All right. I also see Stephen Canill. I hope I'm pronouncing that name properly, who is an opponent. And are there any other members, are there any other people present today? Anyone else who is attending this meeting who would like to be heard on this item? If you are, if you could either put that in the chat or raise your virtual hand. Is there anyone else that is here to be heard on this item, item 16, which is the consolidated annexation of 1101 Olive Branch Road? Anyone else? I want to make sure that we're giving everybody a chance. All right, I believe not. Ms. Schwedler, I'm going to ask that you go ahead with your presentation, and Ms. Smith has offered to share her screen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jamie Schwedler on behalf of the applicant, 301 Fayetteville Street, and I'm here with Parker Poe representing Timothy Sivers, who's also on the phone tonight. While we're waiting for Ms. Smith to raise the presentation, I did want to commend the staff for doing a fantastic job in the Searles work session, which is why this case was deferred till tonight. They did a great job laying out the type of development this area can support due to environmental limits and explaining how the low to moderate density development was anticipated when Searles was approved over 4 years ago. This request aligns with that expectation and proposes a maximum of 421 units from rural residential to PDR 2.999. The units are a mix of townhomes and single-family residences with a commitment to at least 100 of each of these housing types to stimulate variety. Next slide, please. The density is compatible with nearby developments and consistent with long-range planning designations. And we've also committed to environmental features, transportation improvements, and townhome design and variation. We could skip to the next slide, please.
Smith, are you able to move those slides?
Thank you.
Yes, I had a moment. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I just read over the second slide. We can stay right here. The second slide was just an orientation of where the existing site is. And you can see on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, that's the Searles map. And our site is the green area, the larger green area in the middle of the Searles Basin. What you see on your screen now is a development plan. And you can see that we concentrated most of the development within existing clearings. The gray areas are shown as the streams and buffers, which will be preserved. But we went above this requirement and committed to a 600-foot wildlife corridor centered on the stream, running north-south in the center of the site, shown in green on the screen in front of you. This leaves 3 main pockets of land to be developed between the buffers and tree stands, shown in hatch with dots on your screen. Next slide, please. With respect to sustainability, we are exceeding the UDO requirements on both preserved tree coverage and open space, committing to programming of the open space and amenity areas, dedicating a greenway easement or building a trail, adding paving for bike lanes along our frontage, and preserving the wildlife corridor I mentioned. These elements are consistent with comp plan policies on increased environmental protections and bike greenway accommodations, but they're also specifically consistent with the East Durham open space plan for this particular site. Next slide, please. This slide shows that open space plan with our site in blue towards the bottom half of the screen. The East Durham open space plan contemplated a proposed natural corridor running north-south across the center of the site and a planned greenway trail, both of which we've committed to in this request. Next slide, please. This slide shows the traffic commitments we are making at our site access points on Olive Branch Road and Virgil Road, which mainly consist of additional turn lanes to maintain traffic flow. Next slide, please. And we are also making off-site improvements of an additional turn lane on Olive Branch Road at 98, shown towards the left of your screen, widening Highway 98 itself, and installing a new traffic signal at 98 and Kemp, shown towards the right side of your screen. As Mr. Judge noted in the Searles presentation, these improvements are not funded by the city or NCDOT on any timetable, so this development provides a means for completing these in the nearer term to ease existing traffic congestion and mitigate new trips from this development. And you can see in context where our site is on the right side of the screen and how far away those improvements are on 95, just to relate back to the Searles Basin. Next slide, please. We're also making significant design commitments for townhouses as shown in your packet, and they're summarized here on the screen. I won't read each of them, but they include distinctive architectural features, materials, block length, and the appearance of front facades, which we've grown accustomed to hearing comments from the Planning Commission and incorporated those in at the Planning Commission level before we came here to you tonight. Next slide, please. As we've covered, I think the site is shown in blue on the next screen, is in the heart of the Searles Basin area. At the work session, we heard from Mr. Greeley with the Department of Water Management that the $40 million Searles project and the fees charged to offset its costs were based on the basin developing in low to moderate density, which is consistent with this request. Staff also noted that it was actually better for the environment in the long term to have the public utilities that this development would provide instead of having septic, which is all that is available today, or if the site was developed with existing zoning. As Director Young noted, septic is more likely to fail over time and it cannot support residential uses. And so the annexation and development with public utilities is actually more beneficial in this scenario. This project commits to connecting two Searles consistent with the comprehensive plan, as well as extending water along Kemp Road. Next slide, please. As noted in your staff report, this project is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The low density designation is consistent with PDR in the suburban tier and provides a mix of single family and townhome housing. In addition, the single family is planned for two different types of housing, traditional and more of a patio or ranch home to allow for different price points and preferences. All of this will provide more housing on smaller lots and result in a more affordable supply than what is developed across the line in Wake County. And we think that was very effectively explained by Ms. Young during the work session. I've also noted how the open space commitments are consistent with the Eastern Durham open space plan, and the transportation improvements, including the widening of 98 and new signals, result in an acceptable level of service, which is also consistent with your comp plan policies. Next slide, please. In sum, this request is reasonable and in the public interest because of its offset of the Searles costs. It's over $3 million in off-site roadway and utility improvements, its donations to public schools, and its donation to affordable housing. The one change that Ms. Smith noted that we're making tonight is we're increasing our affordable housing commitment to $300 per unit, which totals roughly over $126,000 to the Affordable Housing Fund. We're making no other changes to the commitments, but just increasing that amount. And together, these commitments exceed those of any recent project approved in the East Durham area. Next slide, please. In sum, these requests are consistent with the comprehensive plan, with UDO requirements, with the Searles land use and infrastructure planning, and they respond to a growing need for housing in this area at an appropriate density. We thank you for your time tonight and your patience, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Schweidler. We have someone else signed up to speak, who is Stephen Cannell. Madam Clerk, could you make Mr. Cannell available to be heard? Mr. Cannell, can you be heard?
I'm here. Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Have I pronounced your name right?
No, it's nil. The K is silent.
I'm sorry.
Not a problem. So I'll try. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Nell.
I'll try to be brief here. I'm the head of the Courtyard Andrews Chapel Finance Committee. Andrews Chapel is on the corner of Leesville and Andrews Chapel. I also lead our community action group, which we're linking to similar groups at Carolina Arbors and Fendel Farms, all that share the roads being discussed. These communities are homes to about 4,000 seniors. I was able to speak at the October discussion of the Leesville Road Annex public hearing for 344 townhomes. And I understand you're also considering 66 more townhomes on Leesville Road next to Fendel Farms. I have two quick issues. The first one is the same as the issue that we had about the 344 townhomes on Leesville Road. These are all two-lane roads: Olive Chapel, Carpenter Pond, Leesville, and Andrews Chapel. In your documents in 8C, the attachment to the request lists the area communities that may be impacted. First, some of the numbers of the total homes are incorrect, but the big omission is that it doesn't include 1,265 homes at Carolina Arbors. So it includes 1,608 homes, but with an additional 1,265 that should be included as to how this impacts the area. The impact study also uses numbers from a 2017 NC DOT traffic count. I've lived here since October of 2018. Believe me, the traffic has grown much more than this traffic count lists. The proponent of this talks a lot about the changes they're making on Route 98. But this doesn't really, those don't have anything to do with the direction that the majority of these residents will go to get either to US 70 or to Briar Creek and 540 and 40. They will be traveling down all two-lane roads to get to those general destinations or conveyance roads. Interestingly enough, the Leesville Annex documents didn't even list the community's impact, but again, it used the 2018 NC DOT traffic count map. So that's the traffic, and those roads are my number one concern. And speaking to residents in all three of these communities, they all have the same similar issue. We need to get these, at least Leesville Road, widened in order to make this a workable situation, or we will have significant backups. Now, there's a fire station on Leesville Road that in rush hour, if these get backed up, could be heavily impacted. The second concern we have is that the documents for the Leesville Road Annex from October 4th, 344 townhomes, listed an impact of 76 additional students. This one being discussed tonight is for 421 townhome and or single family homes, and that lists an impact of only 29 additional students. I'm not sure how that math works together. If you're saying you're going to have 76 additional students in 344 townhomes, I don't know how you're going to get to 29 additional students when you're going to have single family homes, which naturally have more people in them. So both of the, and again, that obviously affects school size, school cost, property taxes, et cetera. But to just get back to the beginning, the major issue is Leesville Road, which Olive Branch dumps out into, and the backups that will occur if we don't get that road widened while we greenlight all these new communities. We're not opposed to the communities. We're not opposed to the development. The development is great for Durham County and Durham City, but we need to be able to move people. The U.S. studies say that most major communities, Durham included, have 2 cars per home. We're now talking about, 3,800 homes right in this area. That's 7,000 cars. These roads are not made for that many cars. So that's the point I wanted to make tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nill. I appreciate that, and we'll be asking some questions about that in a little while. I do want to just say that in terms of the, I know what you're talking about in terms of the increase in students, but just to explain that, because I know that that's something that's often confusing. The increase in students is calculated between what the existing zoning will produce and what the new zoning will produce. And so it's the base, it's the underlying zone, it's the current base, what the current zoning will produce and how that's different than what the new zoning will produce in terms of students. And that can be very different in different situations. And so the first case that you referred to wouldn't produce more additional students because it was a zoning from a lower opening density. So I hope I made sense of that, but that's the reason that we see that. But I know that your most important point is your point about the roads, and we'll be having some discussion about that because I think that's important to all of us. Thank you very much, Mr. Nill. Is there anyone else that would like to be heard on this item? This is a public hearing item. If there are any attendees that would like to be heard on this item, if you could either raise your virtual hand or say so in the chat, that would be great. All right, I don't see any, so I'm now going to ask if there are any questions or comments by members of the council for either staff or the applicants, or any of the speakers. Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Schwedler, can you help me understand how the presentation that you showed us tonight differs from what the Planning Commission saw when they considered this item?
Sure. We had many of the same text commitments and that were proffered at the table and at that night that are now part of your case. And the Planning Commission expressed a gratitude or appreciation for including those. A certain commission members wanted to go further, and I think those were along the lines of whether Durham wanted development that was less car-centric, had more mixed-use development or commercial aspects to not just residential, whether there could be creative solar or environmental elements on the buildings themselves. But then there was also the commission member who moved in favor of moving it forward, greatly favored the variety that was proposed and kind of recognized that the density and the mix of housing was something that would add to Durham's supply. So the votes kind of fell along those two camps.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear about my question. First of all, thank you for that information. But what's different tonight versus what the Planning Commission considered when they had it before them?
Oh, I'm sorry. Just merely the passage of time, we increased the affordable housing contribution, and I believe up from 100 at the Planning Commission up to 300 tonight. But really, there was a much more robust discussion of this area since this was considered, and I believe it was considered in June of this year. And if you recall, there were many more cases that you all heard in this area and a much more robust discussion between that time and today, including the work session. But the actual merits of the case and conditions didn't change except for the affordable housing commitment.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Butler. That was my main question, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Other questions or comments, colleagues? Councilmember Freeman.
I had a question for staff, and it may not be something that's readily available, but I want to just note and acknowledge. So I know Ms. Swedler mentioned the 2007 East Durham plan, and I just wanted to touch back on some of the things that she mentioned and acknowledging that there was a Clean Water Trust Fund, and I'd love to know if anyone knows how much is left in that trust fund right now.
Council Member Freeman, I'm not aware of how much is left in that trust fund. There might be another staff member on the call that may know. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure that I can answer that question.
Okay. And then
there's someone else there. Maybe they'll jump in right now. If not,
I'm hoping so. If not, it's okay. I just wanted to get a number because it looked like it was only like 200,000 in it at that point in 2007, and I wasn't sure if that was for the entire East Durham area, especially around the falls of the Neuse Reservoir. The questions that I had, though, specifically were just like in looking at this report, because I had to pull it up because it's been a long time since I've seen it or even thought about looking at it. But there were a number of issues that were raised in this report that I feel like speak to the lapse and where we are today. And so just noting from 2007 to 2020, there have been many acknowledgements in how greenhouse gases, climate change, all of these things have been evolving. And this plan that we're referring to as a reason to move forward with a project like this, because the CERLs are in place, doesn't seem sufficient. And so just noting, and I'm trying to get to that page, there was a push for traffic conditions and air pollution continue to, I'm sorry, number 7 and on page 4. And just noting like there were a list of like 9 areas that this plan was looking to address. And I just want to note the failures in those areas and acknowledging that today, even with the DOT unable to move forward with repairs, we would be, the cost for that road widening that was mentioned earlier would fall on the city. And then just also noting that the preservation in these floodlands, which are prone areas to create flood damage or property damage for homes that are in those areas, would fall on the property owners that are in those homes. And so just noting, like when we're talking about these high density sites and flood zones, we create even more harm, and the impact is not just on the front end of just being cheaper to purchase, but also on the backside of being expensive to maintain. And so just noting that on this specific case, and in many cases, I've raised this issue, and this document, which I really wish I had read in its entirety before this evening to refresh all of my concerns around why we have to be really specific about developing in these wetlands. especially on Olive Road and Leesville Road, and acknowledging there was a plan in place to preserve the farmland, and there was a hope that we would be able to prevent some of the failures from occurring, but they're not acknowledging where we are today, the differences that need to be made. And so I'm really looking forward to a point where we can have small area planning that would address something like this, but I know that that's not right now. And so it's hard for me to see the benefit of having 300 and some odd townhomes and 3 different sections near this wetland. And I'm, yeah.
Thank you, council member. Other questions, colleagues, or comments this time? All right, Ms. Schwedler, I have a couple of questions. First, I would be interested in you addressing some of the comments that Councilmember Freeman made. Councilmember Freeman,
Oh my God.
could you tell us the report that you were talking about that I'm not familiar with? And I also see in the chat, Ms. Schwedler asked about that. What report is that?
It's the Eastern Open Space Plan.
Okay, the one, and I see. So, all right, thank you. Ms. Schwedler, you all refer to the East Durham Open Space Plan in your presentation, or rather it's referred to in the staff report, and you referred to it as well. Do you want to comment first on the open space and the preservation that you're doing and the concerns that Councilmember Freeman raised?
Sure, I'm happy to. The portion of the open space plan I was referring to is really more of the land planning of preserving the corridor down the center of the site. On the open space plan back on our slide, it showed a corridor alignment that really lines up with what we've done on our development plan and exceeded what was required. So there's a corridor shown with a greenway, and we've committed to both of those elements, but expanded the corridor to 600 feet for the wildlife corridor. And I wasn't speaking directly toward the fund, and I don't know that I can speak toward the balance of that. I think that question was directed to staff. But to the extent we need to address any stormwater questions or concerns, we do have Tim Cybers on the line to address those. And before we turn it to him, I think the point I was trying to make with the Durham Open Space Plan is that given the environmental constraints throughout the Searles area, applicants are encouraged to preserve as much of the environmentally sensitive areas they've done. And we've done that not only through the corridor, but also through an additional commitment to tree preservation and open space that exceeds the UDO. Tim, if Tim Cybers could be made available, if there were specific questions on the stormwater that he might be able to address.
Yes,
Thank you.
I believe, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Cybers, welcome. Could you talk to us about the stormwater treatment that you anticipate and anything else related to the open space that you think would be valuable for us to hear?
Sure. As Jamie mentioned, Tim Cybers, Horvath Associates, 16 Consultant Place, Durham, North Carolina. So yes, the stormwater requirements will be met through the site plan. We will be working with Mr. Shea Bullock, the Stormwater Department review at the time of site plan to review those to make sure they're part of city code. As for the floodplain, in response to potential flooding of downstream residents, there's very minimal downstream residents. There's a lot of large parcels at this point, and we're very close to the further downstream. And in addition, our requirements within our site is that we will not be able to increase the floodplain elevation. So we'll have to make sure our single stream crossing, if you'll note, we have limited our crossing to one vehicular stream crossing across that main floodplain area. So where that crossing is, we'll have to make sure our infrastructure is sized adequately to not increase the floodplain elevation. Thank you, Mr. Cybers. Colleagues, actually, I'm sorry.
Ms. Schweidler, I have another question for you. Looking at the Durham DOT and NCDOT letters, looks like the traffic flow will actually be much better than the current traffic flow after improvements are made at NC 98 and Kemp Road than they are now, which is good. And thank you. I appreciate the commitments to the offsite improvements, which we don't see very often, but I appreciate the significant offsite improvements. We see the same situation, though, that we're seeing in all these developments out here, which is the worsening situation, not just because of this development, but because of the developments out here at Olive Branch and Leesville Road. And I wondered if you wanted to comment on that, and then I'd like to hear if staff would like to comment on particularly on the intersection at Olive Branch and Leesville Road. Ms. Schweidler, do you have any comments on that, or your traffic engineer?
I do briefly, and then I would like to have to Tim and the traffic engineer address that because Tim has a perspective on Leesville Road, and then we can hear directly from the traffic engineer. Tim?
Yes, this is Tim Sivers again. So as you, the council members are familiar, 2 weeks ago, the Leesville Road assemblage was approved, and that project of 344 townhomes will be doing improvements along Leesville Road, which is directly across from the courtyards that Mr. Neal had spoke about. Those improvements on Leesville Road will be widening in areas that's a 2-lane road up to 4-lane road at both the access points for that project, in addition to Andrews Chapel. There's other developments in the area that will also be doing further improvements at Olive Branch and Leesville. And I will pass that to our traffic engineer, Mr. Bahong Wan with VHB, that can provide more information on that item.
Sure. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Mayor. My name is Bahong Wan. I'm a traffic engineer with VHB. We prepared traffic study for Olive Branch rezoning in 2009. We also worked on the Leesville assemblage with Tim Sivers as well. So our TI was prepared in close coordination with the City of Durham and its NCDOT. And the recommendations has been reviewed and approved by the City and DOT. As Jamie and Tim already mentioned, this project made a real significant commitments along NC 98. So as Ms. Mayor, you pointed out, the level service under the future conditions are actually better than the current conditions. So which not only benefits some traffic from this project, but going to benefit the travelers along NC 98. I think that can bring opportunities for the public and for future development as well. Regarding the roadway capacity along Leesville, first I want to mention about Leesville is a 2-lane road. So just like Olive Branch and Virgin Road. So for a 2-lane road without turn lane, the typical capacity is about 13,000. So the current ADT along Olive Branch is 2,300 in 2019, and it's less than 1,000 on Virgin Road. So this project is expected to generate 3,500 daily trips. So our analysis showing it's under capacity for both Virgin Road and for Olive Branch. But we are committed to make roadway improvements with turn lane. So by adding turn lane itself, a 2-lane road with turn lane, the capacity will increase to about 15,000 range. Now also about Leesville Road, I think Tim already mentioned that project is going to make widening improvement and turn lane improvement at a side access and also at Andrews Chapel Road. And with other developments going on, I think you correctly pointed out the development, the growth is not only due to these 2 projects, it's due to many other projects, but other projects are also making commitments as well. I know there's a future signal plan at Doc Nichols at Leesville Road with signal and with turn lane improvements. I think there are also turn lane improvement plan at US 70 at Leesville Road as well. And there's many other occasions. So each development is evaluate their own traffic impact, make improvements, so do their fair share. In my opinion, this project has done more than its fair share of transport improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wan. Mr. Judge, could you comment on what you see ahead for Olive Branch and Leesville Road? What are your thoughts about that?
Yes, thank you. Bill Judge, City of Durham Transportation. So the intersection of Olive Branch and Leesville is challenging for making improvements due to the proximity to the intersection of Leesville and Shady Grove. The Leesville Shady Grove intersection is the primary intersection that's already been that's planned signalized, and improvements have been there due to the proximity. It's not really appropriate to install a signal at the intersection of Leesville and Olive Branch. The long-range plans do show a sort of realignment of Olive Branch sort of to the north of Shady Grove and Leesville. That would be ideal, but that project will be very challenging. There's some historic properties and a cemetery in the area. So I don't want to necessarily give folks a lot of hope that anything's imminent or funded for that, but that's sort of the long-term goal or solution, is to do a realignment there to improve the spacing.
Is the Shady Grove intersection useful to people in these developments?
It is. I mean, it's functioning at an adequate level of service today. So I mean, the primary delay at Olive Branch and Leesville would just be those coming on Olive Branch going south that want to turn left. So that's where most of the delay is currently at.
Thank you very much, Mr. Judge. Any other questions at this point?
I just have one question for Mr. Judd.
Sure.
You're talking about the traffic count, and I'm just making sure I'm verifying. The counts are by car. They're not by pedestrian, they're not by bike, they're not by motorcycle, like it's by car specifically.
Correct. The traffic impact analysis is pretty much exclusively auto oriented, and it's we're measuring vehicle delay.
And I want, and this probably is more so a question specific to Sarah or Grace, and acknowledging that this is probably the fourth project that's come forward. And so what we're talking about is about 1,200 townhomes in this area, and all of this traffic lining up to come in with these road improvements that this one project is doing. And I think there's a couple of others, smaller ones, but the majority of the traffic that we're all talking about is all car, and the continuation, I mean, this continuation of, I don't want to say that, yeah, I'm not gonna say that, but I just wanted to just get a handle on where that was going. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, colleague, for the applicants or for staff? Any other questions? All right, I'm now going to declare this public hearing closed. And
So before you declare it closed, I just had a question for Sarah in the timeline, I guess. I just would like to know when it's going to come forward to
excuse me,
address.
council member. Let me just say, this public hearing is closed. And now if you have a question for staff, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I just trying to get a baseline or understanding of what the timeline looks like, because I mean, acknowledging that this is 179 acres of land in this area. It's a huge, like, city size, or I should say small town size. Is there any semblance of a movement on this that we're going to get, because we're going to continue to get this push towards down 98. We're going to continue to get this pushed around all of the Searles, and all of these properties are going online with all this density. Is there any conversations that's going to pick up around how we're going to actually build road infrastructure so that it can handle all of these cars and all of these residents? Because it doesn't seem conducive, and it doesn't support a city. Like, it's not building on a city. It's turning these rural communities, these rural farms into subdivisions. and then just throwing all the traffic on that 2-lane road. I'm really starting to get more and more concerned, because I acknowledge that folks aren't concerned about the waterways, and they're not concerned about the stormwater runoff, but at least, I mean, the traffic impacts, this is all starting to just wear on my nerve. But I would like to know what the timeline looks like.
Good evening, everyone. Sarah Young with the Planning Department. Councilmember Freeman, are you referring to the timeline for a Southeast Durham small area plan? Are you referring for a timeline for additional roadway improvements? I'd like a little clarification if you don't mind.
I think specifically to the roadway improvements.
Then I will have to defer to my colleague, Bill Judge, on that.
So yeah, Bill Judge, Transportation, the roadway improvements that are being proffered by the applicant would have to be constructed most likely prior to the issuance of certificate of occupancy. There is a potential where they could potentially phase them, get a few units if they're able to show that there is some available capacity before they would need it at the time of site plan. But most likely, given the existing conditions out here, most of those would be required pretty early in the development. Not exactly sure of their current timeline for constructing, but I would certainly think it would probably, assuming that the site plan gets submitted and approved relatively quickly after the zoning, could be within 2 or 3 years likely.
So what I'm hearing you say is that there's no timeline in place for a large area, like a specific to the streets. You have a plan that are already there, but for interconnecting streets, like back streets or back channels, like how is that planning happening? Is it happening?
Yeah. So in terms of the interconnectivity between the neighborhoods, yeah, that unfortunately is happening as each development develops. So as neighborhoods next to each other develop and extend, we'll be able to build that internal collector street network to provide pedestrian and bicycle connectivity. But right now it's basically each development builds their own portion of it. And then ultimately as every development gets built out, hopefully we should have most of those connections that we need.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Ms. Young, could you refresh us on the small area planning for this area? What you told us about last time we were together, or perhaps at the Searles work session?
Sure. We are going to be starting a small area planning process as part of the new comprehensive plan. And that's been advanced to start it probably in about the next month or so. Staff has already started game planning their kind of schedule of working through that component of the comprehensive plan. So instead of waiting a year out, we're actually beginning it now. And it likely will we will probably have recommendations ready in the spring.
Thank you very much, Ms. Young. Are there any other questions, colleagues, for staff? Any other comments on this? Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Ms. Schwedler and her team for making the presentation tonight. I also want to thank staff for all their work in answering our questions and helping us understand not just this project, but other projects in this area, and helping us kind of get our heads around what can happen in this part of Durham, what ought to happen, and what tools we have as a city to get to where we want to be in this part of Durham. I will just be totally upfront with my colleagues and with everyone listening, is that I'm not sure how I'm going to vote tonight. That's why I wanted to go first, to talk to my colleagues a little bit about some of the factors that I see in this project, and then listen to y'all tell me what you think about it so that I can figure out what the heck I want to do. I think ultimately the Planning Commission had a really good conversation about this project. And I think this was a real conversation between the ideas that were championed in the written comments by Commissioners Durkin and Busby, and on the one hand, and Commissioner Miller on the other hand. I think it's fair to say that Commissioners Durkin and Busby were very concerned that this is a very large piece of property. There is some environmental sensitivity here due to wetlands on the property. and that the open question is whether or not this kind of development on this type of property is really in the best interest of our community. And I'm really grateful to the two of them for raising those critical issues. On the other hand, Commissioner Miller, whose written comments are always extensive, detailed, thorough, and with which I often agree, makes the case that contrary to what I think it was Councilmember Freeman mentioned earlier, this is not actually high density development. This is about 3 units per acre once some of the ecological sensitivities are weighed in. At least that's what Commissioner Miller said. I know it is PDR4. And that in addition to that, the developers made a number of critical design commitments to make sure that this isn't the kind of monotonous sprawl type development that in other situations Commissioner Miller has opposed strenuously. And so all of that, I think we weigh against the backdrop of the presentation that we received, I guess almost a month ago now, concerning this part of Durham, what conditions here are suitable for in terms of development, and the concern that I think we all share about what happens if we say no to projects like this that are annexations that would be served by city utilities. What does that say about what development will come to this part of Durham in the absence of those kinds of utilities? And I think staff showed us pretty clearly on the map about what's happened on one side of the Wake County line with Durham, and I think analogized to the possibility that could happen over here. All of which is to say, Mr. Mayor, that there are lots of competing factors at play here. And I know I have very smart colleagues who are going to have lots of interesting things to say that can help me figure out how I'm going to vote in just a little while. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member. Other comments at this time? Councilmember Caballero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I just want to say that I will be voting for this zoning this evening, since my council member colleague Reese was saying he was unsure, and actually conveniently, well, not so conveniently because it took me a minute, I had to drive out to Wake Forest. And I had 2 route choices. I could go 98 and I could go 540 to get to Highway 1, which is where I needed to go. On the way there, I took Highway 98 because it was something we were considering voting tonight, and I thought it would be great to get some context. And while the traffic is definitely something that on 98 I'm always very well aware of, the part that I found extremely illuminating is once I crossed over into the Wake County line, I started seeing a lot more development than there is in the Durham County line, all around Falls Lake, all in very environmentally sensitive areas. And what's getting constructed out there are massive single family homes. And there was lots of signs near those developments asking for, I think one neighborhood said, you know, come find your dream home for $600,000. And that is what I want to avoid. And I think that while these developments I know are not often in my ideal, I have to make decisions based in the reality that I'm in. And the reality that I'm in is, at least this way, we can control for some of the environmental concern because it's in our sewer system, it's attached to our water. We don't have to worry about potential leaks from septic. I have a feeling that all of those developments in Wake County were on septic near sensitive areas. And it doesn't help us with any affordability issue. I don't know very many people who can afford $600,000 homes. In fact, I know very few. And I certainly know that it does not help the crisis that we're facing here in Durham. And so that is kind of what helped me, you know, make my decision. I was kind of unsure, leaning yes. I think the Searles presentation was very, very helpful, but today provided a very, very clear real world example of what we will get with by right development. We cannot stop the development. All we can do is make it better.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Other comments, colleagues?
I had a question. I appreciate, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Trying to get my decorum right.
Go ahead, Council Member.
Thank you.
Your decorum is just fine.
Okay, well, kind of, thank you, Councilmember Reese, for, I was also kind of out on this and reading the feedback from the Planning Commission's folks. They were clearly split, and so that wasn't terribly helpful. I was kind of curious, Councilmember Caballero, is that about your analysis of the 600K home thing. Is that just kind of a foregone conclusion if we vote this down? I mean, I know it's a risk that we take, but I'm thinking about, I had questions about septic when we talked about the last development, the Leesville project, and its environmental implications. But I'm also curious with our current density, with the current zoning, what options exist? Is it the type of thing where there's a lot of precedent? And I'm asking maybe all my council member colleagues, is there precedent for us voting something like this down and getting something better? Like what kind of precedent is there for for holding out for something better, resulting in a positive outcome? And I'm relying on your collective institutional memory to be able to tell me that as somebody who's newer, on the council.
Well, I think I have the most institutional memory, just by reason of longevity. I would say that happens on occasion, but it's rare. That I thought what Councilmember Caballero said was very eloquent and described the predominant current reality, which is that, usually if we turn something like this down, then the developer usually comes back and develops what they can by right. I'm not saying that always happens, but in my experience, and I guess I'll ask my other colleagues who've also been on the council now several years, if they would agree with that or not. That certainly is that's what mainly happens. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. I can understand how the mayor might see that. I would love to note the cases that has happened in. I know for the 3 years I've been on council and the 4 years on the planning commission, I've not seen that happen. And so there hasn't been a case that's been voted down for me to even go back to say that that's been the case. I think we've kind of done the foregone conclusion that, we're not going to get anything better. And so we'll just take what we can. And that's been kind of the mantra going forward every step of the way. I unfortunately haven't been successful in convincing my colleagues that we could do better and that we needed to really focus on how to develop a plan around large swaths of land like this, so that it's not, I want to be really clear in saying I would like to see the area developed. I would like to see the area developed very carefully. I think this plan that they've put forward is a phenomenal concept, but I have seen the outcome on the other side where then the density is not by acres per unit, it's density in the area. So if you put 12 townhomes right next to the buffer, and then you're right there on the water, the issues that come up are like where your sewer lines are, how much you smell crap every day whenever it rains, or how much is pumped out into your yard, and who those people are that I meet that have those issues has been consistent throughout the entire time I've been on council and on the planning commission. And overwhelmingly, it's usually older people of color or older people who were without means to purchase those $600,000 homes that Councilmember Caballero mentioned. And so, I think we create this like a conundrum where the people who can't afford to be in a property that's not. And I want to be really clear that this property itself We'll have great flood maintenance, like all of that, the site planning, all of that is not the issue. It is whatever else is done around it. And so just acknowledging that Raleigh expanded their city limits to many of our borders. So many of them are on sewer and water. The problem is that so if we just develop just the way they develop, then all that happens is all that compound harm on that environmentally sensitive area. And I don't see a response to that. I just continue to see us develop and continue to see us approve these plans and continue to see approval. There's very rarely a case where it's not approved and get a chance to see someone come back with a better plan. I honestly don't think it should be townhomes densely located located closely in that area. I do think it should be a little bit more spread out because that would create more open space in between the homes, more open space around the homes. And so I'm probably saying way more than I normally do, but it's just concerning. It's just concerning.
Thank you, Council Member.
Thank you.
Council Member Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I want to fully associate myself with the comments of my colleague, Councilor Caballero, and I will be supporting this development. I also want to say, echoing what my colleague, Councilor Reese has said, I found Commissioner Miller's musings, his comments very, very helpful. Mr. Mayor, you are an institution, by the way, but I have enough institutional memory to remember us approving similarly situated developments not too long ago, situated in terms of just the factoids in the presentation. And again, I just want to echo and caution against the appearance of being random and capricious in our decisions. As tempting as it is, I am just not prepared to behave as if we've done small area planning before we have. And as much as we have a vision of what we want areas to look like, I think it's important that we establish that as a standard and codify it. This is me. So, and I know everything's on a case-by-case basis, but it's important to me to be able to, explain my decisions, particularly when there's a record where you can compare decisions as old as a few weeks ago to ones before us now. So I will not, as tempting as it is, I will not behave that we've done the work of small area planning before we have. I'm comfortable with the proffers and the plan of the developers have put forward. Again, I associate myself with Councilor Caballero's comments, and I'll be supporting this development tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to try to answer Councilmember Freelon's question because I do remember a couple of cases that we turned down early in my tenure. I think it was about 2016, and Councilmember Reese probably remembers going out and tromping through the woods at one of them. I think it was like off of Cornwallis. And then there was one up by Coal Mill Road where there were proposals to upzone slightly, again, a mix of single family and townhomes, where the by right development would be just single family on larger lots. The trouble with that is that large lots mean large homes, and large homes means they're not affordable. And so building these townhouses would have allowed for smaller and more affordable homes on these properties. We ended up turning them down because of environmental concerns related to water pollution in those regions. And both of those projects went on to be developed by right with larger homes that were more expensive than the proposals that were brought to us by developers. I can't think of a counterexample. There is one example where we turned something down. The developer came back, added more density, and then we approved it, but it was still a split vote. It was not a unanimous support. There was not unanimous support for that project in either case. And in general, I would like to see more density on this site if possible, because because that feels to me like the primary way that we get more affordability into into our housing plans. I'm convinced by the staff's presentation, though, that more density would not be appropriate in this area because of the environmental concerns. And those are always the things that we're trying to manage, trying to balance, right? In an ideal development pattern, in my opinion, would be something like a buffer where beyond which you would not, extend city water and sewer, but then within the city you have opportunities for greater density. But unfortunately, because developers can build these large suburban communities outside of what we currently have, there's really no way to divert that development energy to doing higher density residential in the city. And we just don't have the ability to control and regulate housing markets in the way that we would need to actually make these visions that we are seeking real. So in my opinion, this is the most density that makes sense in the area, and that's why the proposal makes sense to me. And also given the environmental sensitivity, the ways in which this developer is, preserving the buffers and preserving the wetlands, is an added advantage that wouldn't necessarily happen with a by right development. And the fact that I just cannot, there has never been a development that we turned down and then got back something that everybody was happier with. That I just don't feel like that course of action is going to get us what we need. What is going to get us what we need is more legal authority to regulate the conditions of development. And that's going to require some pretty high level political changes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, I also just wanted to provide some other context for Councilmember Freelon, if that is allowable.
By all means.
Thank you. One of the other things that I'm concerned about in this area, and it's something I think about a lot. Again, I hear everyone's concerns. Ideally, this kind of development, while there are some townhomes, walkability, density, all of these things I think are extremely important. I also do take into account where we are, which is close to Falls Lake. So are those things, is it suited to where it is in the land out there, or on the land out there? And I think another thing that I have a lot of concern about is Wake County is a large county geographically. Durham County is not. And if we are not real careful about what we allow to build here, we have a market-driven system. And so whatever we choose or not choose, and I think we have a pretty good cautionary tale with our neighbor next to us in Orange County, Chapel Hill, who has notoriously hard and complicated zoning rules that have pushed their housing up very, very high. The cost of housing is much higher. And I've lived in North Carolina long enough to know that, some of the folks who were originally pushed out, came over to Durham, and then it caused a ripple effect in our housing market. And that's going to happen in places like Person and Granville County, whose zoning rules are much different than ours, much less stringent than Durham County. And so the environmental cost, all of the traffic costs, all of these things become a regional problem. And so as much as we think about Durham only, we do have to think about the larger, broader context of the decisions we make on zoning.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Colleagues, this has been an awesome discussion. Thank you. We've heard so many good perspectives, and I want to appreciate all of my colleagues and for the things that you all have said. This is hard. These decisions are important, and they're always amongst imperfect alternatives. And that's the reality we face. And I appreciate that everyone has worked hard tonight to talk about. I think we've got a fully, round picture of the complications that we face. All right. I'll now ask if there's a motion to adopt an ordinance annexing 1101 Olive Branch Road.
Move to adopt the ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Middleton, seconded by Councilmember Caballero, that we adopt the ordinance. Madam Clerk, will you please call the vote?
Mayor Schul. Mayor
Aye.
Schul.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero.
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon.
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Nay.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it. The motion passes 6-1. And I see Gwen. Hey, Gwen. And now we'll need a motion to adopt a resolution amending the future land use to low-density residential.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Was there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Freelon. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Stuhl,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Nay.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The motion passes 6-1. Now we'll need a motion to adopt a consistency statement.
Move to adopt consistency statement.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Middleton, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem to adopt the consistency statement. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Stuhl,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Nay.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
and Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion passes 6-1. And finally, we would need a motion to adopt an ordinance amending the UDO.
Move to amend the UDO.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Middleton, seconded by Councilmember Freelon. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Stuhl,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Nay.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to just say, appreciate everybody who came tonight, Ms. Schwedler and your team, Mr. Neal. I do want to also just add one other comment in response to Councilmember Freelon's question. We have over the years I've been on council, we have turned down many rezoning requests that we don't think are good enough. And sometimes that they come back to us slightly tweaked. Sometimes they come back to us very different. Sometimes they don't come back to us at all. They sit there for a long time. So I don't want to give anybody the impression that we're just approving everything that comes before us. We've not improved. We already had some this year we haven't approved, and we'll have others, I'm sure. All right, colleagues, we'll now move to item 17, Consolidated Annexation Farrington Road Multifamily. And I will first hear the report from staff.
Thank you very much. Michael Stock with the Planning Department. Excuse me. Consolidated cases BDG 19-0007 and zoning case Z 19-0036 Farrington Road Multifamily involves 13 parcels of approximately 8 acres, or just over 8 acres, and associated adjacent right-of-way along Farrington Road, Rutgers Place, and Crescent Drive. Council will be asked to act on 3 requests tonight. To summarize, there'll be a request for annexation, request for the zoning map change from rezoning from RS10 to R residential compact with a development plan, and thirdly, act on a ordinance for a statutory development agreement associated with the rezoning request, which also includes the utility extension agreement, and that's an important part. It's normally part of your annexation approval, but the utility extension agreement is actually included within the development agreement itself. The rezoning does include a development plan. The base density allowed for the RC district is 20 units per acre, resulting in roughly 161 dwelling units. The associated development agreement, which is committed as part of the development plan, allows for a density bonus of 332 multifamily units, 82 of which would be affordable units for a term of at least 30 years. Thus, 250 units would be market rate. In short, 25% of the total number of units would be affordable units. Utilities will have been extended to the site by the developer, along with improvements to Crescent Drive. Units will be varied in affordability at 30%, 60%, and 80% area median income, and also vary in 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units within each of those ranges. In accordance with the terms of the development agreement, if construction guarantees for those 82 affordable units are not secured by June 2024, the city may exercise an option to buy those 2 acres that are designated for the units identified as Site B on the development plan for $10. The development agreement also includes the utility extension agreement normally associated with the annexation ordinance, as I mentioned before. And also within your packet is a specific memo from community development regarding the proposed development agreement. The development plan, in addition to the development agreement, includes commitments to roadway and bike lane improvements along Farrington Road, design commitments incorporating requirements of design district zoning standards, construction traffic limitations, the relocation of neighboring water meters, and amenity commitments for the affordable units. The detailed list is found on the cover page of that development plan. Planning Commission heard the case on August 25th and recommended approval 6-5. And as a reminder, 3 actions are requested: adoption of the ordinance for annexation, then adoption of the appropriate consistency statement, and then adoption of the zoning map change ordinance and the ordinance approving the statutory development agreement, which includes authorization for the city manager to enter into development agreement and a utility extension agreement. Along with me tonight are 2 additional staff that were very much involved in the review of the rezoning and the development agreement, even more specifically, Don O'Toole with the City Attorney's Office and Karen Lotto with Community Development. The applicant is also here, also available, and I believe they plan to address council. Thank you. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stock. Colleagues, you have heard the report from staff, and I'm going to now declare this public hearing open. I see that we have 4 people signed up for this item. Dion Nelson, Ron Stewart, maybe that's, and then Mimi Kessler. Is there anyone else that I missed who would like to speak on item 17?
Mayor Schewel, can you hear us from Patrick Biker here, along with Coulter Jewel Thames and Edward Lamas with CKE 5.
I see.
Oh,
I'm sorry, Mr. Biker. Apparently I missed that. I see now. Are you speaking? Are you presenting on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Biker?
Yes, Mayor Schewel. I'll be presenting, and the rest of our team is here to answer questions.
Are Ms. Nelson and Mr. Stewart part of your team?
Yes, they're with Laurel Street, our affordable housing partner.
Yes. All right, but they're not planning to speak separately, I guess is my question.
Correct. That's correct, sir.
Yeah. And then there's Ms. Kessler. Is there anyone else who's an attendee who would like to be heard on this item? If you would like to be heard, if you could please raise your virtual hand or please write to us in the chat. All right, I don't see anyone else at this time. Mr. Biker, we'll begin with you, the proponents, please go ahead and make your presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to wait for a PowerPoint to come up. Very good. Good evening, Mayor Schewel, Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, members of the City Council. I'm Patrick Biker, and I live at 2614 Stewart Drive. I'm an attorney with Morningstar Law Group, and I'm here tonight representing CKE 5 for this agenda item. With us tonight for our team are Edward Lamas of CKE 5, Dion Nelson and Ron Stewart of Laurel Street, our affordable housing development partner, and then Dan Jewell and Jeremy Anderson of Coulter Jewel Thames, our land planning and engineering firm. At the outset, our team wishes to thank Karen Lotto and Richard Valzonis of Community Development, Deputy City Attorney Don O'Toole, and then Sarah Young, Grace Smith, and Mike Stock in the Planning Department for all their hard work on this agenda item. The project before you this evening consists of 332 multifamily units in a high opportunity area that is close to transit, jobs, education, and other important amenities. We are thrilled that through this development agreement, 25% of the apartments within this project, which amounts to 82 units, will be affordable at a combination of the 80% level, 60% level, and the all-important 30% level of area median income across 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. The affordable units will be delivered by Laurel Street and will be of exceptional quality, as Laurel Street has demonstrated throughout its history. Next slide, please. Next, I want to stress two important points about the agenda item before the council tonight. First, this development is at the appropriate density and height for this location, given that it is 41 units per acre, adjacent to parcels zoned for 40 units per acre. And this development will construct 4-story apartments consistent with UDO height restrictions next to the existing 4-story apartments. Second, the development team has met with the neighbors and made development plan commitments to address their concerns. And our team is proud of its neighborhood outreach efforts over the past year as we engaged in direct communications with residents both inside and outside of the notification area. Next slide, please. Your affirmative vote tonight will cause the affordable housing land donation to be made to Laurel Street. But it is far more than just a land donation. Laurel Street will receive its road, water, and sewer infrastructure at no cost, and all of the upfront master planning, engineering, and legal costs will be covered as well. This final yet significant piece of the financing gap, when added to other approved and non-competitively available funding sources, means that these 82 affordable units are fully funded. Last slide, please. In closing, we believe that approval of this agenda item will generate a significant contribution to affordable housing, and it will set a solid precedent for others to follow and a new benchmark for others to meet. The council's approval of this agenda item tonight will directly cause the delivery of these new apartments for 332 Durham households, including 82 desperately needed affordable homes for 82 Durham families. Accordingly, we respectfully ask for your approval, and our team will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Biker. We'll now hear from Ms. Kessler. Madam Clerk, can you make Mimi Kessler available to be heard, please?
Can I be heard?
Yes, you can, Ms. Kessler. Welcome. We're glad to have you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Well, thanks to a correspondence I had with Dan Jewell this afternoon, I'm feeling a lot better about this project. I want to first say that I completely support every effort to create affordable housing in all areas of the city and the county. What I was not aware of, and what I felt happened after the Planning Commission meeting, was that somehow the city wasn't going to get the benefit of those affordable housing units until after 2 years, the developer would sell the property for $10, but then the city would have to develop it. So that was my concern, but Mr. Jewell told me that I guess this Laurel Street organization is ready to get going, and that pleases me, because then I think that the city is getting the benefit up front rather than late. I do want to say that all of the conversation you all just had about making decisions about how parts of our land are developed, and how one development plus another development, all of a sudden there's kind of a problem, and specifically related to annexation, and there were 482 apartments developed right next to where we're about to add 332, and it's a 2-lane road, and the traffic's gonna be horrible. And at some point, with all this annexation, we're gonna run out of capacity in the sewer system and various other pieces of infrastructure. And every time that we go through this exercise, I'm just not convinced that people are saying this is really adding up. So I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned in general about development agreements. This proposal was linked to the establishment of statutory options for development, and the proposal was fast-tracked, and I still don't really understand why, but if it's like a very good example of what I'm concerned is going to happen if development agreements become the standard as opposed to the exception. And that is that there was a great deal of work by multiple organizations with the city before it came before the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission had no opportunity to delay it, even if they had wanted to. And that impacts on the public's ability to actually have any persuasive element because it ends up coming in at the 11th hour. So I would like to say that if development agreements are structured, they should be structured so that the city gets the benefit sooner rather than later in every single case, and that they should not be expedited in order to allow the public to have more thoughtful participation. I did hear what Mr. Biker said about meeting with the community and so forth. I drive past this location twice a day, 5 days a week, and I have never seen a rezoning sign, anything that said that the density was going to get changed. And there are very few people who live around there other than in these new apartments that were created. So it does impact people like me who drive through there, and my commute is about to get really bad. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I do actually hope that you vote in favor of this proposal, but I would like for you to consider my comments related to development agreements and infrastructure replacement that we're going to ultimately have to do if we continue to annex everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Kessler. This is a public hearing. Is there any other attendee who would like to be heard on this item? If so, could you please raise your virtual hand or make yourself known in the chat? I don't think virtual hand was a word before about 6 months ago. All right. I don't see anyone else. I'll now ask if there are questions for the applicant or staff by members of the council. Any questions or comments at this point? Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank the applicant and their partners for putting together what may be the very best zoning case that I've ever had the opportunity to consider as a member of the Durham City Council. I also want to thank staff for the incredible amount of work that goes into something like this. And I also actually want to thank Ms. Kessler for her incredibly thoughtful and I think very on point comments to us about this case in particular, but also how we go about using development agreements more broadly. I think one thing I would say is that the ordinance changes that we passed, I guess, a couple of weeks ago around statutory development agreements did not usher in a period of statutory development agreements in Durham. The General Assembly did that for us. And what we passed were merely a set of guardrails around that process to make the process much more inclusive, much more responsive to community needs, much more protective of our environment. And so I think sometimes that piece kind of got lost in the conversation around the development agreement ordinance. But I just wanted to say that the only way that something gets fast tracked is if we agree to it. And so we are the ones that folks should hold accountable for that. In addition, fast tracking doesn't mean that we have to decide on it at any given time. The city council reserves the right under every scenario to say, you know what, we're not quite satisfied with how this is rolled out. We need you to go back and talk to the community some more, and we're going to keep this open for a period of time. I suspect that doesn't give a lot of comfort to the Planning Commission, who respects its prerogative to put a lot of time and energy into these cases. But it's going to be a very rare case where I think this council will agree to do that. We've done that here, and for reasons that the applicant and staff have explained. And again, I just want to thank all the folks involved in making this presentation to us, and look forward to supporting the item. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Any other comments? Council Member Freeman.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask just flat out for the applicant, is there a reason why, rather than doing the, I guess, affordable housing density bonus, this is the route you took? I just wanted you to explain it so that the public could hear it.
Mr. Biker, would you like to comment, or is there someone on your team who would like to comment? I don't think we can hear you. Mr. Biker, are you trying to?
Hello? Mayor,
yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay,
yes,
sorry.
I can.
It took a little while to work that out. Yeah, we looked at the technical requirements of the affordable housing density bonus for quite a while with members of the staff in planning and community development. Unfortunately, there were just too many technical hurdles for us to get through in order to make this project work. And so that's why the staff came forward with the development agreement framework. There are just various technical requirements in Article 6.6 of the UDO that just didn't work for this site. There's just too many, there's just a lot of moving parts when you have an affordable housing project, and we couldn't make all the parts line up with the discrete requirements of the UDO. So it wasn't for lack of effort. It was just couldn't put a, what's the phrase? Couldn't put a square peg in a round hole. And so that's why we came forward with this development agreement, in order to move forward with a project that has a strong affordable housing component.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I asked you to follow, I guess, to create a follow-up or a feedback loop so that the planning department does get that commentary around what the hurdles actually look like, because I feel like the affordable housing density bonus that we've had the conversation about for years could be a little bit better fleshed out if some of this kind of the example was actually used to show where we could make some changes. And then just to note, I also appreciate Councilmember Reese's commentary and acknowledging how, I guess, the General Assembly has directed this process, and we're trying to create a workaround of sorts. I had similarly, Ms. Kessler, to your comment or your questions, I had a lot of the same concerns around how long before the donation would occur and how it was tied to the zoning case, and just noting that there were a lot of pieces that were kind of pulling together, or pulling a lot of pieces together so that you could make this deal work in a way that was beneficial to the city as a whole. I do hear you on the concerns around the traffic, and acknowledge that this was actually the light rail stop location, or in the light rail stop location. And those changes have to be accounted for, and making sure that we're acknowledging what that financial piece will be to the infrastructure that will need to be added in that area. And so I'm hopeful that the transportation staff is also accounting for that in their planning and moving forward. And I as well will be supportive of moving this forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Any other questions for staff or Councilmember Middleton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking forward to voting for this development today. I also appreciate Councilor Reese's exposition on what we've done here in Durham to appropriate development agreements and contour them to our values in response to Ms. Kessler's comments. So like a sunset, I'm not going to mess it up by trying to talk about it. He was spot on with that. So thank you. Councilor Reese. I remember going to Charlotte not too long ago, Mr. Mayor. I think you were on that trip, a fact-finding trip to look at the paradigmatic shift that the Charlotte Housing Authority was going through in terms of how they approach affordable housing. And I remember looking with envy at Laurel Street developments saying, wow, that's affordable housing. I wish we had something that looked like that in Durham. And lo and behold, here they are in Durham. So I'm really excited and welcome them. I hope that this will trumpet around the nation to other developers and encourage them to come with affordable housing on their minds right out the gate to Durham. So I think this is a good thing, and I hope to see more of it as we move forward. So I look forward to supporting this development this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just also wanted to appreciate our staff for all the work that they did to put this project together, the developer and their partners who are putting affordable housing at the forefront of their work, and especially Laurel Street, their affordable housing partner, who's also doing work with the Housing Authority, with Durham County, in addition to this project. And so really making a difference here in the Durham community. And I'm also just so glad to have them here as our partners in this work. This is, we all know how critical this need is for our community, and I really appreciate the creativity and thinking that went into figuring out how to make this possible. And it's great news for Durham, and I really look forward to going to the groundbreaking in person in a couple of years. Thanks.
Yes, let's hear it for in-person groundbreakings. Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Any other comments? Questions? All right. I'll add my voice to the chorus. To Ms. Nelson and Mr. Stewart, we're so glad to have Laurel Street here as a partner in Durham and all the work you're doing in Durham. I think the problem that Mr. Jewell and Mr. Biker you've created for yourself is now every time you come in front of us, you're going to have to offer 2 acres for affordable housing. I just want to throw that down while we're all here talking. If it can be done here, it can be done lots of other times in Durham, and I want to appreciate the developer for bringing this forward with this creative approach. I also want to notice that this is requiring, so one of the other things I do want to also just what Mr. Biker said about this is not just the 2 acres. The master planning, the providing of the engineering and so forth is also crucial. And so that's another thing that makes this such a great option for the future. And I want to just say that our affordable housing work, it's supported by our 2 cents for housing. Is providing, the $3 million that's going to make this work in addition to the affordable housing, the low-income housing tax credit. It's providing the money that's going to help us close the gap at J.J. Henderson to both renovate J.J. and build the 80 units behind it. The 82 units going up the bus station, all supported by that money. And then, just so many others. And I am very excited that so much affordable housing is really coming out of the ground now in Durham and being designed, and it's a sea change. And just want to express my gratitude to everybody who's making that happen on our community development department and all throughout the city. All right, I'm now going to declare this public hearing closed. I'm sorry, declare this public hearing closed, and the matter is back before the council. We'll need 3 motions here. The first would be to adopt an ordinance annexing Farrington multifamily.
Move to adopt the ordinance.
Moved by Madam Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Councilmember Middleton. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schewel.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnston.
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero.
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon.
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton.
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion passes unanimously. Second, we'll need a motion to adopt a consistency statement.
Move to adopt consistency statement.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Middleton, seconded by Councilmember Caballero that we adopt the consistency statement. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
I'm sorry, Madam Clerk. Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted unanimously. The third motion, and I've been wisely instructed by our city attorney to make this clear, is really a 3-in-1 motion. This motion will rezone the property as stated in the full motion, adopt the development agreement ordinance as allowed by statute, and to authorize the city manager to execute both the development agreement and the utility extension agreement. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Madam Attorney. Is there a motion to those three things?
Move
So
this
moved.
statement.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Freeman, is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Councilmember Freelon. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. Madam Attorney, did we do everything that we needed to?
It was perfect, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it helps to be perfect when you give me the exact wording. Makes it easier. All right, thank you. Thank you to the development team, and we're excited about this project. Thank you for being here as well, Ms. Kessler. All right. We'll now move to item 18, Consolidated Annexation, Knotty Pine Drive Annexation, and we'll hear the report from staff. Hello, Ms. Struthers.
Good evening. Emily Struthers with the Planning Department. A request for a utility extension agreement, voluntary annexation, and initial zoning map change have been received from Neil Mahan for one parcel located at 6933 Knotty Pine Drive. The area of the request is 0.85 acres. The annexation petition is for a continuous expansion of the corporate city limits. The site is presently zoned residential rural, RR, and staff recommends an exact translation of the zoning designation. The annexation petition submitted identifies that the proposed development will be a single-family residential lot. The proposed annexation area is designated on the comprehensive plan's future land use map as low-density residential, which is consistent with the zoning request. If approved, this request would become effective on December 31st, 2020. City and county operational departments, such as solid waste, fire, police, and EMS, have reviewed this request and have not identified any significant negative service impacts. The Public Works and Water Management departments have determined that existing City of Durham water and sanitary sewer mains have capacity to serve the project. The Budget and Management Services Department determined that the proposed annexation will become revenue positive immediately following annexation. Additional information can be found in the staff report. Staff determines that these requests are consistent with the comprehensive plan and applicable policies and ordinances. 3 motions are required for this application. The first is to adopt an ordinance annexing the property and entering into a utility extension agreement. The second is to adopt a consistency statement, and the third is for the zoning ordinance. Thank you, and staff is available for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Struthers. You've now heard the report from staff, and I'm going to declare this public hearing open. I don't have anyone here to speak on this item. Is there anyone who would like to speak on item 18? If so, could you please raise your virtual hand or make yourself known in the chat? I see Mr. Raymond Farrow. Mr. Farrow apparently would like to speak on this item. Madam Clerk, can you make Mr. Farrow available to be heard?
He's been unmuted.
All right, Mr. Farrow, I believe you need to turn on your microphone, unmute yourself there.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. My name is Raymond Farrow, and my wife and I own the property that's adjacent to this lot on 7001 Knotty Pine Drive. And we probably have a stronger interest than normally you would about the development of this property. I think primarily because we share a driveway with this lot. And so we have a cross driveway and utility easement. And the other issue is that the lot is natural and heavily wooded, very much like the Army Corps of Engineer land that is behind both of these lots. And so wanted to just share some of our questions and concerns about this rezoning. And we have not had a chance to talk to the staff member, and so some of these might be easily answered. But one question that we had was whether or not the rezoning of this adjacent lot would impact our current zoning, because currently we're in Durham County. So that's one question my wife and I had. And also the other question was about whether or not the utilities that will be installed, whether that will be completely retained in the existing flag for the lot. Again, because we share this easement, we wanted to have a better understanding of that. And then I think looking a little bit further down the line, since the intention is to develop a single family residence, and we know that this isn't about a building permit, but we did want to, I think, officially register our hope that and concern that we, during the installation of the utilities or the construction, that we maintain access to our home, because the driveway that we share is actually pretty lengthy and narrow, and wanted to also make sure that we were protected from any damage from the construction or the installation of the utilities. And then the hope that there would be some consideration to maintain a buffer between the homes to retain the natural environment and the setting. So those were our questions and issues that we wanted to share tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Farrow. I'm going to ask Ms. Struthers if she would like to respond to some of those. Ms. Struthers, I'll try to paraphrase Mr. Farrow's questions. The first one, I believe, is, will the zoning of Mr. Farrow's property adjacent be affected at all by this zoning there in the county?
No, the zoning request is only for the property of 6933 Knotty Pine. It would not impact zoning adjacent.
Thank you. And then he asked about utilities. Did you get that question, Ms. Struthers?
I got some of it. I don't know that I'm able to fully respond to it, though.
Okay. Mr. Farrow, will you ask your question again about utilities?
Yeah, we were curious about whether the new utilities that are going in to the lot, whether that will be completely retained within the existing flag for the lot. Because it has to, because the lot sort of sits back from the street. And so it has to, the utilities have to run near the driveway that goes up to Knotty Pine. And so,
okay,
will those new utilities be entirely on that lot, or will they need to come over to ours? It's a little bit unclear, just because the property line sort of goes right through the middle and sort of meanders through the driveway.
I see Mr. Joyner here. Mr. Joyner, would you like to help us with this?
Good evening, sir. Robert Joyner, Public Works Engineering Department. So the utilities for this parcel would be on the actual parcel of record. So they would stay on that individual property unless the property owner reaches an agreement for an easement across another property. So they would have no rights to directly access other property without first going through and obtaining an agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Joyner. That was very helpful. And Ms. Struthers, Mr. Farrow also had concern about access to his property during construction, those kinds of things. When would that, how would that be addressed, and when would that be addressed during the process?
I believe that would be addressed in part through the construction drawing. Well, it's a single family home. When they're working through the building permit requirements and the closer to actual construction, that's not something that staff has analyzed at this point.
Sure. And as I understand this is a shared driveway, Mr. Farrow?
It is.
Ms. Struthers, do you have any comments on how that works with a shared driveway?
That would need to be coordinated between the builder and if any easements that would be required at that time.
And the easement would need to be acquired from Mr. Farrow?
I believe that looking at the maps currently, it looks like the flag portion of the parcel is owned by Neil Mahan, who is the applicant of the annexation petition. So that may not be the case.
I see. So it could go through the flag, the flag part of the property and not up just up the shared driveway.
It's a little hard to tell on maps exactly where that driveway lands, since our aerial imagery is not specifically 100% accurate. It's hard to say without a survey.
My question is really, what role would Mr. Farrow be able to play in this? If his concern is this might happen, and that he would be access would be blocked to his property.
Coordination with the proposed developer would be the route there.
Can the developer block his property without his consent?
I don't believe so.
Ms. Young?
Good evening. I just wanted to chime in and say that in situations like this where you're talking about an easement, it's private property. And so that's something that they would need to work out between the developer and the adjacent property owner. It's not something that we can regulate from the land use perspective. So at that point, it kind of becomes a civil matter between the two entities.
Right. Thank you. That's what I was thinking, and appreciate your confirming. Mr. Joyner, did you have additional comments?
No, sir. Just standing by in case there's any additional questions.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Farrow, I hope that answered your questions, or most of them. We appreciate your being here with us.
Yes, thank you.
We'll now move to another speaker. Neil Mahan is here to speak to this item as well. Madam Clerk, can you make Neil Mahan available to be heard?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much, Council. I would like to say to Mr. Farrow that he does not have to worry about the utilities. When I built the house that he lives in now, I brought the water and sewer back at the same time. And if he'll look out, looking out to the street from his house, he'll see sitting out at this lot about 180 feet back from the street, a white sewer pipe and a black water pipe. And those utility pipes have already been pulled back there in line with what they were, the requirements were in 2002 when I built that house. And I would feel that any request that he has relative to when the lot is built on, whoever the builder is, should be held liable to maintain the driveway in its present condition, and if any damages to it, they need to improve upon it. But as far as the utilities are concerned, that should not be a problem. Do they have any other questions for me?
Thank you, Mr. Mahan. Are there any other questions for Mr. Mahan? Sir, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you for allowing me, and I would like to thank Ms. Struthers for walking me through this for the last 11 months. I'm a 82-year-old person who's in a retirement home, and I'm trying to get this through by myself, and she's done a great job of assisting me. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that compliment from Ms. Struthers. We know how excellent she is, but it's really nice to hear it confirmed. Thank you, sir. Colleagues, are there any more questions or comments? If not, I'm going to declare this public hearing closed and the matter is back before the council. We would need three motions here. The first will be to adopt an ordinance annexing Knotty Pine Drive.
And to authorize the city manager to enter a utility extension agreement.
And to authorize yes, you're exactly right, to authorize the city manager to enter the utility extension agreement. Is that a motion, Councilmember Reese?
It is indeed, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Reese, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. The next motion will be to adopt the consistency statement.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Reese, seconded by Councilmember Caballero, that we adopt the consistency statement. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion passes unanimously. The third motion will be to adopt the ordinance amending the UDO.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Reese, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero,
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon,
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion passes unanimously. Mr. Mahan, thank you for being here. Mr. Farrow, thank you for being here. We're grateful for you all being here with us tonight. And thank you, Ms. Struthers. And Ms. Struthers, it's great to hear confirmation again of your excellence. We appreciate it. All right. Now we move to item 19, Paschall's Bakery Building and the Studebaker Building, landmark repeal. And first we'll hear the report from staff. Ms. Smith, are you with us for this item?
I am here. I'm Grace Smith, again with the Planning Department. This is a request to repeal the landmark status for Paschall's Bakery and Studebaker Building. The original status was approved through case LD 17-00001. The location is 115A and B North Duke Street. The applicant is David Revere of 2050 Bentley LLC, and David does have a representative on the call here tonight. The staff recommends approval of the repeal of this landmark designation. The Historic Preservation Commission recommended approval 4-1 at their meeting June 25th, 2020. Staff is available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. You've heard the report from staff. I'm going to declare this public hearing open, and I'm first going to ask if there are questions by members of the council, and I think I'll ask the first question. Ms. Smith, why did someone vote against this landmark designation repeal when the buildings are no longer standing?
That's a good question, Mayor Schul. That was our Commissioner Jordan, Joseph Jordan, and he was concerned. I think he thought that the repeal would, he was thinking there were some archaeological remnants potentially, but we explained to him that even if there were, that's not how the original landmark was designated. It was designated for the buildings, not for archaeological artifacts or evidence. So he still was not comfortable for whatever reason, so he voted against it. But the designation was originally for the buildings, and the structure are gone. So therefore, there's no more landmark or designation to be found on the property.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Colleagues, are there any other questions for staff? Ms. Freeman, and then Councilmember Middleton. I'm sorry. My apologies. Councilmember Freeman, and then Councilmember Middleton.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I just wanted to just caution Ms. Smith on, I guess, putting a connotation that I didn't know. I just want to make sure it's clear that because the property was a historic or designated a landmark, that it was because it's still possible to rebuild doesn't mean that it's feasible to rebuild. And so there's a difference. Even though the building's not there, it could still be rebuilt to the specific specifications. So I don't know that that would be practical, but it's still possible. And so I just didn't want it to seem like it was as if he didn't know what he was saying or doing. That didn't seem accurate. Thank you.
No, I think he was more concerned about artifacts maybe in the ground or some kind of historic evidence of some other historical significance that may still be intact. But it was cleared completely, and we're not aware of any of that being that survived the explosion.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question. If the historic designation was tethered to the actual structures and the structures no longer exist, does it then carry over to air rights? Why do we need to take it away if they were tied to the building?
So this was an older designation case, or when I say older, it's not recent. It wasn't done in the last couple of years. And we no longer automatically designate the land when we designate buildings. Back when this case came through, the land was designated along with the building. The land under the structures was designated along with the buildings. And so the slab that's still there is technically sitting on land that's designated, and the property owner would like to rebuild. And since there's not a landmark there anymore, the landmark is gone, the property owner would like to rebuild and new construction. And we don't have any criteria for, you don't reconstruct a landmark necessarily, especially when it's pretty much gone. If it had not suffered so much damage, it might have been able to be repaired, but it's beyond that, obviously. So because the land was designated a technicality back in the day, the repeal is technically for the land at this point.
So it was,
yeah.
Okay, so it was land and buildings. I'm wondering if that no vote maybe was informed by knowledge that it was indeed land and buildings, and there might be some archaeological.
Right. Well, that was what I was saying. I think Commissioner Jordan was just uncomfortable because he wasn't sure what archaeological remnants were still intact, but there aren't any that we're aware of that would have any significance. The only thing that's left is the slab that was sitting there. So the State Historic Preservation Office agreed. So I was just sharing his concern as best as I could articulate it from the meeting that I was in. So
thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for staff? Okay. Colleagues, let me ask, is there anyone present who would like to speak on this item? I should have asked that earlier. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on this item? If you would, please raise your virtual hand or make yourself known in the chat. All right. Seeing none, I'm going to declare this public hearing closed. The matter is back before the council. We would need one motion, which would be to approve the repeal of the landmark designation.
Mr. Mayor, just before I make the motion, I just wanted to thank staff for adding the notes based on the questions I asked at work session regarding the trade-offs on designating it a landmark or not. I really appreciated having the explanation spelled out. And then I'd like to make the motion to repeal the designation for the landmark.
Thank you, council member. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Freeman, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, that we approve the repeal of the landmark designation. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Caballero.
Aye.
Councilmember Freelon.
Aye.
Councilmember Freeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton.
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. And thank you to the staff as well. This is a sad moment. But we're definitely sure we're doing the right thing here. All right. We'll now move to item 20, curb, gutter, and paving water and sewer mains and water sewer laterals on the portion of Ardmore Drive. This is a public hearing item. We'll first hear the report from staff. And this will be Mr. Joyner. Welcome, Mr. Joyner.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Schul and members of the council. I'm Robert Joyner with the Public Works Engineering Group, and I would like to start by saying that item 20 is to consider the ordering of petition improvements on a portion of Ardmore Drive. The proposed project is inside the city limits. Staff recommends that council accept a certificate of sufficiency for the petition, adopt a preliminary resolution, conduct a public hearing, and adopt a final resolution to order the improvements. I'll be happy to answer any questions council may have on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Joyner. You've now heard the report from staff. I'm going to declare this public hearing open. We do have some people who have signed up to speak on item 20. We have 3 people that I see who would like to speak: Joel Graybill, Dane Summer, and Isaac Woods. Let me ask now, is there anyone else present who would like to speak on item 20? Is there anyone else? If you would, please raise your virtual hand or make yourself known in the chat. All right. I will ask first Mr. Joel Graybill to if you could make him available to be heard, Madam Clerk. And Mr. Graybill, you have 3 minutes, and we're glad to have you with us.
Good evening, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for the town council. I represent the ownership group that owns 623 Ardmore, and we have, I think we're the owner that has the longest lineage of street. We have about 640 feet on this section. And I just wanted to say that we would very much appreciate the city's consideration and approval for this. And the staff, Laura Adcock in particular, has been great, very helpful to us. And I would just like to convey our desire to have the city approve this. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us and for those comments, Mr. Graybill. The second speaker is Dane Summer. Could you make Dane Summer available to be heard, Madam Clerk?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. This is Dane Summer and my partner, Arlie Marcotte. We are of 710 Ardmore Drive. We just wanted to briefly chime in and say we are in support of this petition. Obviously, it's a dirt road currently, and we think that paving it will allow more homes to be built on the road and further improve development in this area, as well as, you know, of us as well as we plan on building our future home on this section of road. So we appreciate the consideration tonight, and hopefully you're able to pass this petition.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Summer. And also we'll hear from Isaac Woods. Mr. Woods, welcome, and you also have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. I appreciate this opportunity. I would like to also commend and recognize the outstanding city employees, Unity Bailey, Laura Adcock, and of course, Mr. Robert Joyner and Assistant City Manager Bo Ferguson and Marvin Whitfield, the director, on their assistance in getting this portion of Ardmore Drive paved. I would also like to recognize the mayor and Councilmember Freeman and Councilmember Middleton for responding to my emails. We worked on this project for over 2 years, trying to figure out the disparity of why one part of Ardmore Drive was paved and curb and gutter and water and sewer, and the other end wasn't. But we're at this junction now where I think we have a petition before you, and I strongly recommend you approve this. Just to give you a brief history of this, this area was annexed in the city more than 3 decades ago. It was forced annexation, which probably nobody on the city council remember that, but I think Ms. Page, Assistant City Manager Ms. Page and Robert probably can tell you about that part. We were promised water, sewer, and street paving over 30 years ago. The city came through and they installed the sewer line, as you can see. And then they came through a couple of years ago and they paved one end of Ardmore Drive and put water in the other end of Ardmore Drive. And we were trying to figure out what happened with this disparity on why one end resident property owner had preference over the other. And they said we need to do a petition, which I took up the role, and we beat on the words, and everybody signed it to get a majority, which I think was a tremendous process. But what we not only asked you to approve this project, we asked that you give this project a priority. It'd be moved up as a priority. Number one is we've been in the city forced by over 3 years. The house across from 725, as I was communicating to the city manager, and your police chief will tell you, it burnt down to the ground. And your police chief, he said, only thing we can do is contain it because we have no fire hydrants. So as taxpayers, we pay a higher homeowners insurance as well on our homeowners insurance because we don't have a fire hydrant within distance. So if the insurance company say we're high risk. The second thing is, it's just a good way to cause cohesive in the same street. I mean, Ardmore Drive is one street of all property owners and neighbors. And we should all not be in the business of creating disparity on providing some city services to one end of the street and the non-city service to the other one. So that being said, we ask that not only you approve this, but we ask that the funds for this project be increased because, as you know, as time goes by, you know, if you remember 30 years ago, I remember the average water bill was $5. Now the average water bill is $35. And now we're incurring additional expenses by delaying this project more and more because the cost of paving and water lines and everything increase. And we're long past overdue. We ask the council to make this a priority, to make this services available that we pay taxes on, and we're all on the same street, available to all the property owners. And I thank everyone for their time.
Thank you. I also believe, looking at your comment, that there's Isaac Woods Jr., who's also here to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Woods, you also have 3 minutes. Welcome.
Yes, I'll be short. I echo some of the same comments that Isaac Woods mentioned before me. As I'm Isaac Woods Jr. of 725 Ardmore Drive. My family has resided at that address for generations. And we are in support of, and we ask that, you know, the roads are paved, and we have curved gutter, water, and sewer drainage. As the rest of the road does, we hope that you all will be expeditious in addressing this inequity on our half of the road of Ardmore Drive. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Woods. This is a public hearing item. Is there anyone else present in this meeting who would like to be heard on this item? If so, could you raise your virtual hand or make yourself known in the chat? All right, thank you. Hearing none, I will now ask if there are questions or comments by members of the council, questions for staff or comments at this point. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple questions. We heard a little bit from staff recently about this petition process, and I have concerns about the way our process is currently structured based on a situation that we had recently where a number of ordered utility improvements had kind of languished for several, I mean, a lot of years, a decade even, and the cost of those improvements had escalated to the point that we were, you know, going to be out millions of dollars because we weren't able to charge the homeowners any increase in rates based on how the cost of the jobs had appreciated. Is that still, like, to my knowledge, we have not changed that process. Can I get confirmation from staff that that is the same situation that we would be entering into with these improvements if we were to approve this petition, that if we weren't able to complete the improvements for a period of time, that we could be facing city costs of even more than what's listed here, which is already pretty high, like $1 million, but that we would have to cover any additional costs?
Robert Joyner, Public Works Engineering. That is the situation as it currently stands. That process has not been amended. It is under review currently. and we are awaiting updates as we finish current petition projects, things of this nature over the next few months, and look at rate changes and things of that nature likely to occur in January.
Okay, so this petition is coming to us under the current rules that created that situation.
Robert Joyner, Public Works. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So I mean, maybe it makes sense. I don't know what kind of options we have to delay this or to, have it proceed under those different rules, given that the current rules are under review. I have a lot of concerns about proceeding with our current rules, given the situation that we've been put in before and the potential for the city to have an extremely large and unexpected cost in the future based on approving a petition right now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Council Member Freeman.
Thank you. I appreciate Madam Mayor Pro Tem expanding or explaining that, or expounding on what would be the situation if we didn't actually act or request the kind of priority in this, and acknowledging that it can take a long time to get the process moving. And I think that in this particular case, because it's been over 30 years and folks have been annexed and one half of the block was done and the other half not, that this is a specific case in which it might be prudent to just move forward, approve it, and then make it a priority so that we don't incur those additional charges. I acknowledge what you're saying, and I think you're absolutely right that we need to figure out how to change it going forward, but I don't think in this case that we should hold off on getting this moving. But thank you. And I was just gonna acknowledge, I appreciate the work that the folks in this neighborhood have done to try and jumpstart the process to make sure that you did get the equity in place of having water and sewer online, acknowledging that you are paying city taxes. And I'm hopeful that this will move forward, and I'm hopeful that that the project will be prioritized and that we can kind of close this chapter for Ardmore Drive. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Mr. Joyner, the part of Ardmore Drive that was paved, was that paved under a petition process?
It was, Mr. Mayor.
And we have now, we have quite a number of miles of unpaved roads in the city. And we have a process now for prioritizing the ones that are going to be paved. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And I believe we have roughly $3 million in the CIP for paving unpaved roads in this coming years. Is that right also?
Yes, sir. Specifically, I believe for dirt streets.
For dirt streets. And so how are those dirt streets chosen?
Those are all of the remaining, those are all the remaining dirt street miles listed in the city of Durham currently.
So
roughly 18.7.
And would that $3 million pave them?
I do not have that information directly in front of me if it would cover all of that.
I doubt it, but I see Mr. Williams here.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, Marvin Williams, Department of Public Works. We actually have $1.2 million in the budget for dirt roads for the fiscal year. And we anticipate asking for that amount of funding on an annual basis for the next 10 years to pave the roads. And that's only paving the roads. What the petition project sponsors are looking for are improvements beyond just general paving. So the dollar amount that we've been funded would not pave all the dirt roads in the city, nor would it address the additional improvements that the petition sponsors have requested. And we do plan on bringing an item to council for review and discussion in January of 21 with the updated costs related to the petition projects, to give you a menu of options to choose from, whether that's full cost recovery, some type of high percentage recovery based on actual construction costs, along those lines. So we are reviewing that data right now as we finish up some of the current petition projects, and we'll be bringing those items forward to you in the coming months.
Thank you. That was really helpful, Mr. Williams. Could you talk a little bit about the process for choosing which roads are prioritized in the street paving process?
With regards to the dirt street paving program, we are looking at all the roads that are unpaved, like Mr. Joyner stated. And we're actually looking at some of the data that we have in our maintenance division as far as annual maintenance costs, and just taking an initial look there. Most of the roads that we have high maintenance costs on are in East Durham. In the Angier Driver area, specifically Briggs Road is probably the dirt road with the highest amount of maintenance that we spend on an annual basis. So we were looking to start in that area first and then go in somewhat of a clockwise or counterclockwise rotation around the city, but then again, looking annually at which roads we're spending the most money on to maintain, and then moving forward with prioritizing those roads annually if funding is provided to us to pave them.
Thank you. And so Ardmore would be on that list?
Ardmore would be on the list only for paving, but not for any type of curb, gutter, sidewalk, utility extensions. The dirt road program was not intended to provide those types of infrastructure improvements. It was essentially set up the way that we discussed it with council to have a actual paved surface that would reduce our maintenance need for dirt road grading on an annual basis.
And for the cost recovery, you're going to bring us options for cost recovery in January?
Yes, for the petition project, so that we move away from the current process that we have in place, and that the city's no longer in the position that we're in now with this current set of petition projects, where the city is subsidizing a large portion of the petitioned improvements on various street segments.
The cost of this improvement on this project would be, for the city, would be about $1.1 million. Is the source of that from the general fund?
Yes, this project would have to be submitted into the fiscal year 22 capital improvement program process, and it will compete with all the other general fund projects for funding. So it will really be the council deciding if this takes a higher priority over other general fund projects.
And okay, those are my questions. That was really helpful, Mr. Williams. Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions, colleagues, or comments at this point? Councilmember Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Marvin, good to see you. So if tonight, what we're being asked to do tonight, if we were to just ratify or affirm that their certificate of sufficiency is indeed sufficient, would this put them in the queue? We're not committing the money tonight, right? But if we don't act, will they even be online for consideration to have their street paved?
So if you do not approve it tonight, we would not move this project forward into consideration in the next round of capital improvement projects for the next fiscal year. We would essentially put this petition on the shelf, so to speak, and the residents will be required to wait until we bring forward the item in the capital program. You do have the option to rescind it altogether and require the residents to submit a new petition under the revised guidelines, whatever they may be, in 2021. That's an option you can consider. But no, if you don't approve it tonight, it will not move forward for consideration for funding at all.
Right. I appreciate according to the letter, our ability not to grant it or rescind it, but the fact that they have met the requirements as the charter exists tonight before us now, this kind of reminds me of that whole our friends in Forest Hills that wanted to do an MPO, but we had new plans coming down the road. So should we put that on hold in anticipation of what's coming down the road? And it just always kind of concerns me when we have rules that are already codified and published to kind of, and let me be clear. I fully associate and appreciate Mayor Pro Tem's concerns. I mean, we are fiduciaries of our city to be concerned about fiscal responsibility. This feels kind of like an institutional integrity and fairness issue to me. Not totally, but to some degree. So, I mean, I'm curious to hear other concerns or questions or comments by my colleagues, but I'm highly inclined to it's kind of hard to argue when it's called a certificate of sufficiency. If it's sufficient relative to our standards as they exist now, I would strongly be in favor of granting it. But I'm curious to hear the rest of the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member. Mr. Ferguson, I see you on our screen. Would you like to add some comments?
Thank you, Mayor. Bo Ferguson, Deputy City Manager. Just wanted to offer comments of clarification to Councilmember Middleton. So you are correct. The sufficiency has been determined, and what the sufficiency does is allows the council to hear the request. So without the sufficiency test being met, this discussion would not be before you this evening, and that is really the bar that is cleared by sufficiency. Whether or not council deems the improvement to be appropriate and necessary and for this process to move forward, that is still a legislative decision of the council. And so that is not to sway the council in one way or the other, but sufficiency does not compel the council. Sufficiency allows the council to consider the question.
No, I appreciate that. And my observation was just the poetic impact of the word sufficiency. I'm aware that it doesn't compel us to have to do it, but I appreciate the clarification. With that said, I guess the test, I see no compelling reason not to grant moving forward with it in light of all that said. But again, I'm open to hearing from my colleagues about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Other questions or comments at this time? Council Member Caballero.
Yeah, so just a clarifying question. I think this has already been said, but this is for curb, gutter, utility extensions, and paving. And the other piece that we've been talking about, which is mapping and paving dirt or gravel roads, is just paving. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that difference.
Robert Joyner, Public Works. This is for curb, gutter, paving, and utilities.
Thank you.
And the other item is strictly just paving.
Perfect, which is where the cost differentiation occurs. I want to say that I'm curious to hear what my other colleagues have to say. I live on a dirt road. I have utilities, but I live on a dirt gravel road, and it's no fun. I've always been curious to know what the city spends on maintenance on my road, because they're out pretty often due to whenever there's a heavy rain, there's a lot of issues. So I deeply can understand the petitioners. Although I have utilities, it can be a challenge to live on a dirt road when thinking about stormwater and other issues around that. So again, I'm at this point just want to hear what other of my colleagues would like to add to the conversation.
Thank you, Council Member. Okay, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed, and now we'll just continue this discussion among the council. I'll offer my comments. I understand that I'm grateful for the petitioners and their work, and I also understand that we need to be doing everything we can to make sure that all of our dirt roads are paved. I really believe in for when a petitioner comes before us, I really believe that we ought to have full cost recovery, and that we ought to make that our principle. And I have seen through when we had the situations with Ravenstone and the adjoining neighborhood, where we ended up paying millions without getting the full cost recovery. It was a really big hit to our city treasury. The reason to be, of course, I can see reasons to be for this. The reason to be against it is it's $1.1 million out of our city treasury, out of our general fund, at a time. Well, it wouldn't be right now, but that money is very valuable to us. And I just believe that for improvements like this that are petitioned for, there should be full cost recovery, or very nearly full cost recovery. And that that should be a principle. And that we should, I believe we should put this on hold until we have spoken to it, to the system that we believe is a just system in January. Because I believe that what this does is it allows people who are able to take advantage of this process to jump ahead of what are other priorities that the city sets as a city. And so that's my big concern. I certainly appreciate that, why these folks have petitioned, and I completely get it, but I don't think that what we have is a fair system or a good system. And that's my concern. Other comments? Councilmember Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to thank you for your kind of very sober analysis of where we are in terms of the process that we have in place right now, what you think is a better system. And I think this is not the first time you've advocated for that kind of system when we do these kinds of improvements. And I just respect your consistency and your persistence about that. I don't believe that if we vote to approve this measure this evening, that it puts Ardmore Drive in front of anybody else on any priority list. Based on what staff have told us, a vote tonight merely puts this on the menu for our capital plan for the next fiscal year. If the vote tonight were to obligate the city in the current fiscal year to spend the kind of money that it's going to take to make these improvements, I doubt I would be in a position to support it. But that's because right now we're not really in a position to support a lot of things that we'd like to do. But I think putting this on the menu for the council to consider as we build the capital improvement plan for next year is a reasonable and prudent step, because it provides us with the ability to move forward with it if we think that in the balance of all the other items that we have in front of us at that time, if it makes sense to us. And that, I think, is completely fair and reasonable, and moves these folks a little bit further along to getting their street squared away. I think the other thing I want to add is this is not the first of these types of situations that we faced. I think it's fair to say that you, as my colleagues, know that I have been very concerned about folks, residents who try to access the system in some way, whether it be utility extension agreements that were entered into with folks a generation ago, or this kind of situation also running over years, that the city not break faith with folks. And I understand none of us were here when promises were made and assurances were given, but we're here now. And I have always felt that is an important principle to keep front of mind as we consider these types of claims and processes. And Mr. Mayor, when we get to January, I suspect I'll be much closer to your position about full cost recovery, because I think that makes sense going forward. But I think these folks deserve to be considered under the process we have now. I don't see any compelling reason to wait until January, and I intend to support the measure tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member. Other colleagues? All right, we have a motion before us. Let's see here. Or the motion that we will need. Would be to accept can we do this all in one motion, Madam Attorney? So it would be to accept a certificate of sufficiency, to adopt a preliminary resolution and so forth, or do we need separate motions on each of these?
So, Mr. Mayor, I would just read through the motions as they're indicated. So first,
All right.
you've already received the presentation, so yes, start with the certificate of sufficiency.
All right, thank you.
For them in order.
Is there a motion to accept a certificate of sufficiency for a petition?
Move to accept the certificate.
Second.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, of course.
If we approve does this obligate us to complete these improvements at whatever future cost they may, that may apply to the city?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Joyner. All right, I'm sorry, I didn't hear who made the motion, so I'll ask again. Is there a motion to accept a certificate of sufficiency?
Move to accept the certificate of sufficiency.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Middleton, seconded by Councilmember Freeman. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
No.
Councilmember Caballero,
No.
Councilmember Freelon,
Sorry, no.
Councilmember Freeman,
Yes. Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I believe that the motion fails 3-4. And I believe that we don't need to take any more action, therefore. Is that right, Madam Attorney?
Correct. I think that's a condition precedent, Mr. Mayor. So if it's failed, the rest of the motions will fail as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here today.
Mr. Mayor, point of order.
Sure.
Just clarification, just for information moving forward. I'm wondering, and Madam Attorney, if you can help me, if statutorily the certificate of sufficiency is sufficient, I'm wondering, is this accept a certificate the same, should we be read the same way as if we were accepting a report, and then the actual action would be to adopt? Can we declare that it's not sufficient, or are we not accepting it? Did we just vote? That doesn't negate its sufficiency. We're just saying could you just explain to me just from future, that's just how this thing works moving forward as a legislator?
I think the vote was that you have not accepted the certificate, because that's what the motion was, to accept the certificate, and it was voted down.
Okay, but that's not to say that it did not meet the statutory standard.
Correct. You're just not accepting it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Attorney.
As I read it. Okay.
Thank you, and that'll be useful for the next item as well, of course. All right, thank you. Thank you for those who came to petition, and I deeply understand your concern, and you can see that the council has differing opinions on this, but I appreciate you all being here. All right, we'll now go to item 21, also a public hearing item, curb, gutter, and paving, water and sewer laterals on a portion of Linden Terrace. We'll first hear a report from staff.
Good evening, Mayor Schul and members of the council. I'm Robert Joyner with the Public Works Department. Item 21 is to consider the ordering of petition improvements on a portion of Linden Terrace. The proposed project is inside the city limits. Staff recommends that council accept a certificate of sufficiency for the petition, then adopt a preliminary resolution, then conduct a public hearing, and then adopt a final resolution to order the improvements. Be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joyner. You have heard the report from staff. I'm going to declare this public hearing open. And first I'm going to ask, is there anyone here who would like to be heard on this item? All right, I don't see anyone. And so now I'll ask colleagues, are there any questions or comments for Mr. Joyner at this time? All right, hearing none, I'm going to declare this public hearing closed, and the matter is back before the council. We would need a motion to accept a certificate of efficiency for a petition.
So move.
Moved by Councilmember Freeman. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councilmember Middleton. Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Schul,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson,
No.
Councilmember Caballero,
No.
Councilmember Freelon,
No.
Councilmember Freeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Middleton,
I vote aye.
Councilmember Reese.
Aye.
Thank you very much, colleagues. The motion fails 3-4. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues,
If I'm at a point of personal privilege,
of course.
I think at some point this discussion is going to fall under the equity rubric. And there historically in our city, there have been some folk who their land may have been annexed into our city, and who, although it may be decades later, there are some people in our city that will never be able to afford, be able to participate in cost recovery. And I think that's an equity issue. It's interesting. This discussion for me shares the same intellectual anatomy and architecture as the reparations argument. When that bill comes due, and I know this is slightly different, you know, when we're going to have to write that check for reparations as a nation, and go back all the way back, and, you know, kind of at the current cost, at current value of dollar, you know, it's going to be a pretty heavy lift for our country. And I just wonder how we're going to reconcile our concern for equity. And there are folk that will certainly try and game the system. And I appreciate Councilor Reese bringing up the notion of institutional integrity, which is kind of where I landed on those previous cases where we absorbed that money because we, not we personally, but we as an institution said we would do it. I'm just wondering what our institutional responsibility, if any, will be to those folk who will never be able to participate in full cost recovery. And do their streets just remain unpaid forever? Or do they never get curb or gutter? Or do we wait for them to just make enough money to be able to do it? So I just want to, you know, that has obviously no bearing on what we've done tonight, but I just want to put that out there in terms of something we will need to, I think, wrestle with as a council, indeed as a city, as we move forward. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, colleagues.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. Agreed. And, you know, in my mind, the best way to do that is to set up a fair system that nobody gets to jump. And that fairness, you know, just like when you think about how we've prioritized, you know, let's just take the press release this week about how we chose where the street trees are going to be planted. This was done through a racial equity lens, and I think that is the way we ought to be thinking about all these systems, and we are. I'm proud of the way our city has been doing that. And I'm very much in agreement that that's got to be foremost in our mind. And I think the way we do it is to have a system that nobody gets to jump. That's my own feeling. But these things work themselves out in the particulars as well as in the philosophy. And we'll look forward to hearing from our staff on this in January. Councilmember Freeman, did you have a comment also?
Yes, I just wanted to, I appreciate Councilmember Middleton's summation that's helpful. I just wanted to just note, when we talk about fairness, the aspect of equity has to take into account the history of our country. And so just denoting that fairness now doesn't mean that it creates equity in the future. You have to make sure that you account for the past history. And so I just want to make sure that we keep having that conversation in light of how we're talking about race equity and race equity lenses. And then just also noting that for these folks who do live on that side of the street, what is their, I guess, way forward towards getting city water? Because it doesn't jive for me for them to walk away from this without city water or fire hydrant or any way to put out a fire on their block.
Thank you, council member. Any other comments? Okay. Thank you very much, colleagues. I believe we have done all the business for tonight. And I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned at 10:19. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.